The board above Cradle 9 read decommissioned in the Span Authority's clean amber glyphs, and Cole Merrick said a ship was coming through it in 90 seconds. Dr. Orrell did not look up from the graph tray at once. He had learned, over the 11 weeks since he had cut a fixed spatial reference into a human boy's ruined inner ear, that the fastest way to lose an argument with Cole was to answer him quickly. So the small, gray-plumed physician finished coiling the last of the calibration leads, set them in their cradle, and only then turned his round dark eyes to the long window where the boy sat with his back to the wall. "Cradle 9 has been cold for 6 years, Orrell said. The Authority pulled its coils. There is nothing there to come through. There's a sill there." Cole did not raise his voice. He never did any more, not since the accident had scraped the panic out of him along with most of his balance. He sat very still on the medbay bench, forearms on his knees, a battered tin cup of cooling tea between his hands. "It's charging. Somebody lit it about 4 minutes ago, and they're bringing it up slow so the ring stays quiet." His jaw shifted, the way it did when he was reading something behind his own eyes. "It's about 2/3 up the winding now." Orrell came around the tray. Through the window, the third tier of Corvin sill lay flat and pale under the noon glare of the cluster's white sun, gantries throwing hard black shadows across the apron, a fuel sledge crawling between 2 parked lighters. Cradle 9 sat at the far end of the tier, its docking ring dark, its status lamps unlit, a decommissioned husk the maintenance crews used for scrap storage. Nothing moved on it. Nothing had moved on it in 6 years. "Cole," he kept his voice even, "you are describing a healing nerve. We have talked about this." "You keep saying that." The boy's mouth moved at one corner, not quite a smile. "You said it about the freighter last week. You said it about the 2 male runners the week before that." He lifted the cup, drank, set it down on the bench beside him without looking. 90 seconds, maybe less. They're in a hurry and they're being sloppy about it. The doctor should have gone back to his leads. Instead, he stood there, and the old professional discomfort settled in him like a stone. The specific dread of an instrument that disagreed with the machines and keeps being right. Selith medicine was proprioceptive medicine. It was why his people had built the long trade in balance grafts and vestibular scaffolds and inner ear reconstruction that had eventually deposited him, licensed and unremarkable, on this dust-choked relay at the edge of the conquered span. He knew the human vestibular system to the last hair cell. He knew that when a gate sync accident had crushed Cole against a coupling mount and torn the delicate machinery of his balance out by the root, the boy should have spent the rest of his life unable to stand without falling. He knew what he had done to prevent that. He had grown a spatial sensor into the boy's skull, a graft of the same field-sensitive tissue the Selith grew for their own deep space pilots, keyed to give the nervous system a fixed external reference, a felt sense of down where the ruined organs could no longer supply one. He had not intended to give the boy a felt sense of the gates. But the graft did not know the difference between the pull of a planet and the pull of a threshold being torn open in spacetime. Both were curvature, both were a bending of the local field, and the human nervous system, it turned out, the nervous system of a creature that had evolved on a Havlan 17 world where the ground itself killed the unwary, did not politely ignore a signal it could not use. It learned it. It mapped it. It built, out of a medical accident, an instrument no survey in the Concord's records had ever catalogued. "How far?" Orrell said. It was not quite a question. He was already moving to the wall panel. "Bearings low and to the coreward side. Same tier." Cole tilted his head a fraction, and the doctor had seen a listening animal make exactly that motion before it decided which way to bolt. "It's a small one. Passenger-class ring, maybe a light hauler. 2 of them behind it, further out, cold still, just the ones charging. 2 behind it. 2, a pause, they're waiting their turn." Orrell keyed the pier feed. The panel woke and showed him Cradle 9 in flat noon light. The dead ring, the unlit lamps, the amber decommissioned glyph hanging over it exactly as it had for 6 years. He looked at it, and he looked at the boy, and he felt the 11 weeks of failing to prove Cole wrong stack up in him into something that was no longer doubt and had not quite become belief. "There is nothing on the feed," he said. "There won't be." Cole reached for the tea again. "Not till they light. That's the whole point of a gate like that. It doesn't show you it's opening, it just opens." He drank. "Watch the middle of the ring, not the lamps." "The lamps are dead, the ring." The doctor watched the middle of the ring. For a long moment there was only the dead cradle and the white sun and the fuel sledge crawling away between the lighters. Oral's 4 species neighbors on this relay would have told him he was a fool for standing here, a sensible physician holding his breath at a scrap husk on the word of a 19-year-old maintenance rigger who had been dropped on his head by a gate coupling. He was aware of being a fool. He kept watching the ring. The air inside the dead cradle folded. It was not a light, and it was not a sound. It was a wrongness in the middle of the ring, a smear where the far gantries behind it bent and doubled and then were not there at all, and out of the smear a ship's nose slid matte, unlit, running dark, a small passenger ring exactly as the boy had said, sliding out of a threshold that the span authorities' own board swore did not exist. It cleared the ring, killed its drift with a hard, cold burn, and settled onto the dead cradle like something that had done it 100 times. Oral did not move for the length of a breath. "Told you they were sloppy," Cole said. He set the cup down. "They didn't even trim the burn, somebody's new." The doctor found his voice. "That cradle is decommissioned. There is no gate there." The authority removed the coils. "The authority removed the coils they wrote down." Cole leaned his head back against the wall and closed his eyes, and for a moment the exhaustion in his young face showed through, the specific tiredness of a person who has stopped being able to not know things. "There's a live sill in the floor of Cradle 9, Doc. There's been one the whole time I've been in this bay. I feel it every night. It's cold most of the time. And a couple times a week, somebody warms it up and something comes through that isn't on any board on this station." 2 more folds of the air, minutes apart. 2 more dark rings sliding out of the smear and settling onto the decommissioned cradle, exactly where the boy had said the waiting ships would come. By the time the 3rd one landed, Dr. Oral had stopped telling himself about healing nerves. He had a different problem now. He had a patient who could feel the gates the span authority had erased from its own records, and he had 11 weeks of clinical notes, filed to the authority's medical registry under his own license, describing in careful detail exactly what he had grown into the boy's skull. Corvin Sill was not a place people came to. It was a place things passed through. The relay hung at the throat of a 9-gate cluster, a fat armored drum of a station bristling with docking tiers and coil rings, the single choke point where 4 shipping lanes braided down into one before they threaded out into the deep frontier. Everything that moved between the inner Concord and the raw edge worlds came through Corvin, got its transit stamped by the span authority, paid its toll, and moved on. The authority ran the gates. The authority ran the tolls. The authority ran the board that told every captain in the cluster which thresholds were live and which were dead, and no ship in Concord space could open a sanctioned gate without the authority's ring lighting it from the relay's core. That was the theory. Cole Merrick had spent 11 weeks lying in a med bay learning that the theory had holes in it, and that the holes had ships in them. He had come to Corvin the way most humans came anywhere in the span, cheap, young, and useful. Humanity was net positive in the Concord's ledgers those years, a scattered labor pool from a Deathworld the survey graded a Haviland 17, a category most species read as a clerical error until they met one of the labor pool in person. Humans took the jobs the fragile species could not, the high-radiation coil work, the vacuum rigging, the coupling maintenance that put a body inside a gate ring's field while it charged. Cole had been a rigger. He had been good at it. He had been 11 meters inside the Cradle 4 ring, resetting a coupling shim, when a sync error had brought the field up early and slammed him against the mount hard enough to turn the inside of his skull to gravel. The authorities' own med registry had listed him as a total loss, vestibular destruction, bilateral. A rigger who could not tell up from down was scrap. They had been 3 days from shipping him back down the lane to a charity ward on a core world when Dr. Oral had read the file, and had done a thing that Selith physicians were not, strictly, supposed to do to non-Selith patients. Cole did not remember the surgery. He remembered waking up able to stand. He remembered the first night when he had lain in the dark and felt the whole station around him as a shape, not seen, felt, the way you feel a stare with your foot in the dark, the mass of the drum, the pull of the cluster's sun, the slow grind of the grav plating under the deck. And under all of it, faint and cold and wrong, a knot in the floor of a cradle 6 tiers away that pulled at something in the back of his skull like a splinter he could not reach. He had thought he was dying. He had thought the graft was failing. He had told Oral, and Oral had told him about healing nerves, and for a week Cole had believed him, because the alternative was that he could feel a hole in the universe that no one else could see. Then the freighter had come through the cradle that the board said was dead, and Cole had stopped believing him. He had learned to read it the way you learn to read anything, by being wrong, and then less wrong. A sanction gate opening on a live cradle felt clean, a smooth iris of curvature that flowered and closed and left a warm, fading ring in his sense of the place. That was the authorities' ring doing its work, announced, stamped on the board. He could feel every one of those. He could tell a heavy freighter's threshold from a mail runner's the way you can tell a truck from a bicycle by the sound through a wall. But the knot in Cradle 9 was different. It never announced. It sat cold and unlit for days, a dead splinter, and then some hand he never saw would warm it. A slow secret charge that the ring in the station's core never touched, and something would come through it running dark and unstamped, and settle onto a cradle the whole station had agreed to forget. And then it would go cold again, and the board would say decommissioned, and Cole would lie in the dark with a splinter in his skull knowing that the Span Authority was lying to every captain in the cluster. He had not told anyone but Oral. There was no one else to tell. A rigger with a head injury does not walk up to a Span provost and explain that he can feel the gates they hid. But the ships kept coming, and Cole kept counting them, and 11 weeks in, he had a number in his head that would not let him sleep. 41, he said the next morning, when Oral came to change the graft dressing. The doctor's long fingers paused at the seal behind Cole's ear. 41 what? Ships through 9 since you woke me up. Cole watched the ceiling. That's just the ones I caught. I sleep sometimes, call it 50, in 11 weeks, through a cradle that isn't on any board. Oral finished the seal in silence. He was a careful creature by nature and by training, and everything in his careful nature was telling him to write nothing down, say nothing, and put the human back on a hauler to a core world where his impossible splinter would be somebody else's registry problem. He was aware that this was the sensible course. He was also aware, with a physician's particular clarity, that he had made the thing in the boy's skull, and that a physician who makes a thing does not get to pretend he did not. "What do you want me to do with a number?" he said. "Nothing." Cole finally looked at him. His eyes were steady, too steady for 19, the flat calm of someone who had already run every version of the conversation in his head and found the same wall at the end of all of them. "There's nothing to do with it. That's the part I keep landing on. 50 ships came through a hole the authority runs the whole cluster to hide. Whoever's warming that sill has an authority key, because you can't light a coil ring on this station without one, which means it isn't smugglers slipping past the authority. It's the authority. You don't know that. I know you can't warm a span coil without a span key." Cole sat up slow, the way the graft still made him sit up, testing the floor with his sense of it before he trusted his feet. "And I know the ships come in dark and leave dark and nobody logs a single one. That's not a leak, Doc. That's a business. Oral packed the dressing kit with more precision than it needed. Outside the small window, the white sun crawled up the flank of the drum and lit the noon glare across the tiers, and somewhere 6 levels down a cold splinter sat in the floor of a dead cradle, waiting for a hand with a key. "If that is true," the doctor said quietly, "then the most dangerous thing on this station is not the gate. It is the person who knows about the gate, and there are now 2 of them in this room." Cole almost smiled. "3, he said. "You're forgetting the ones who own it. They've always known." That was the morning the authorities sent for Dr. Oral, and Cole learned that he had miscounted only in the boy's favor. Provost Vashkir Amit received the physician in the relay's core ring, in an office with a real window onto the gate cluster, a rare and expensive thing on a station where every wall could have been dead metal. Beyond the glass, the 9 sanctioned rings turned slow in the sunlight, threshold halos flickering, as sanctioned traffic came and went, the whole braided throat of the frontier laid out clean and lawful and bright. Amit was of the VSK, blue chitinous, tall, plated in the segmented armor his caste grew instead of war. His 4 working limbs folded with the stillness the VSK used the way softer species used a smile. His enforcement caste had run the span's relays for 200 years. He did not stand when Oral entered. He gestured, with one plated forelimb at a display already lit above his desk. "Your registry filings," the provost said. His translated voice came flat and dry, each word laid down like a tile. 11 weeks of clinical notes on a human labor casualty, a vestibular reconstruction, unusual. You grew him a spatial reference organ. Selleth deep pilot tissue in a human skull. A pause the length of a held breath. "That is not a sanctioned procedure for a non-Selleth patient, doctor." "He would have been shipped out as a total loss," Oral said. "I restored his ability to stand." "The registry has the outcome data." "The registry has more than that." Amit's forelimb moved, and the display scrolled, and Oral saw his own careful notes hanging in the sunlight, the graph schematics, the field sensitivity logs, and worse, the observation entries he had made in the first weeks before he had understood to stop making them. The notes read, "Patient reports sensation of gate activity outside visual range. Patient describes threshold charging on decommissioned cradle 9. He had written it as a symptom. A clinician documents symptoms. He had documented, in the authority's own registry, the exact thing the authority had spent 6 years, and a great deal of money to keep off every board in the cluster. He understood all at once why he had been sent for. "The human," Amit said, "reports sensing a gate on cradle 9. He is a head injury," Oral said, and hated himself a little for the ease with which the lie came. "The graft is field sensitive. It produces phantom sensations. Cradle 9 is decommissioned. He is describing noise." The provost was still for a long moment. Behind him, the 9 sanctioned rings turned in the clean, lawful light, and Oral found he could not stop thinking about the 10th one, the cold splinter 6 tiers down, and how very much the VSK in front of him was not surprised by any word the boy had said. "Yes," Amit agreed at last softly. "Noise, of course." He closed the display. "Still, noise on the authority's registry is untidy. I would prefer the human's notes did not travel. And I would prefer the human did not either." He tilted his plated head a fraction. "I am arranging his transfer. A specialist facility, core ward, better equipped for a case like his. You will prepare him for transport, quietly, within the week. He is my patient. His treatment is ongoing." "His treatment," said Provost Amit, "is concluded." He turned back to the window to the bright lawful gates. "You are a careful physician, Dr. Oral. You have a license and a practice and a filing history that is otherwise clean. Careful physicians keep it that way. Prepare the human for transport." Oral walked back down through 6 tiers of the drum, with the word concluded sitting in him like a swallowed stone. He knew what a core ward specialist facility was for a patient the authority found untidy. He had been in the Concord long enough to know that some transfers arrived and some did not, and that the ones that did not were never the authorities' fault, because out on the deep frontier ships were lost to raiders all the time, and everyone knew the frontier was dangerous, and the board said so. He did not go straight to the med bay. He stood a while at a rail on the fourth tier, in the noon glare, and watched Cradle 9 sit dead and amber at the end of the row, and he thought about a boy who could feel a hole in the universe, and about how the safest thing in the world for the Span Authority would be for that boy to be aboard a ship, alone, in the deep frontier, when a gate the boy could feel, and no one else could open up beside him in the dark. When Oral told him, Cole did not react the way the doctor had braced for. He did not go pale or argue or ask what a specialist facility meant. He listened, sitting on the med bay bench with his forearms on his knees, and when the doctor finished he was quiet for a moment and then he said, "What day?" "Within the week." He didn't set a day. "He'll set it late." Cole reached for the cup that was always somewhere near his hand now, the tea gone cold hours ago, and drank anyway. "Whatever's coming that they need me gone before, it's got a date. They'll ship me the night before it, close enough that the notes go with me and far enough that nobody connects the two." He looked at the window at the pale noon tears. "You should stop filing on me. Anything. Today." "I already have." "Good." A pause. "It won't matter. What you filed's enough, but good." The flatness of it unsettled the doctor more than tears would have. He had treated humans before. He had a working theory that the calm was a Deathworld adaptation, that a species which evolved among predators large enough to eat it whole had learned that panic was a luxury the prey animals could afford and the top of the food chain could not. He had watched Cole rig a coupling with a torn shoulder without changing his breathing. He was watching the same thing now, aimed at his own death, and it made the small hairs stand along the doctor's plumage. "They will root you through it," Oral said. He had not meant to say it aloud. "The gate. They will put you on a transport and open a threshold beside you in the deep, and the board will say a raider took you." "Yeah," Cole set the cup down. "I've been thinking about that." "How can you be so?" "Because I've had 11 weeks to think about the exact way this station could kill me, Doc, and it turns out there's only about 3 of them, and this is the neatest." The boy tilted his head, that fractional listening angle, then let it go. "I'm not going to be on that transport." "You are a labor casualty on an authority relay. You have no standing. You cannot refuse a medical transfer." "No," Cole agreed, "but they don't know what I can do. Not really. Amit thinks I feel a splinter in Cradle 9 and I made you write it down. He doesn't know how much of the field I've got." He looked at the doctor, and for the first time there was something under the flatness, something that was not fear and was not hope, a cold working attention that Oral would remember later as the moment the thing in the boy stopped being a symptom and started being a plan. "Nine's not the only one." The doctor went very still. "What?" "There's more than one ghost sill in this cluster." Cole said it the way a man reads a gauge. "Nine's the one I feel loudest because it's close, 6 tiers down. But there's a cold one out past the second sanctioned ring, deep, been quiet the whole time. And there's one that isn't even on the station, it's out in the field, off the Corward Lane, about 4 hours burn. It warms up maybe once a month. Something big comes through it and goes out again the same night." He picked at a frayed thread on his sleeve. "They didn't hide one gate, Doc. They built a whole second network the board doesn't show. Nine's just the delivery door." Oral sat down. He did it without deciding to. "You are describing," he said slowly, "an unlisted lane through the entire cluster." "I'm describing what I feel." Cole shrugged one shoulder, the rigger's economical shrug. "I don't know what it's for. Moving things they can't stamp. Moving people they don't want counted. Skimming toll off traffic they route around their own board so it never touches the ledger. I'm a rigger, not a clerk. But I can feel the shape of it, and the shape of it is big. And the shape of it has the authority's hand all over it. Because you cannot warm a span coil without a span key." For a long moment the doctor said nothing. Through the window the sanctioned gates turned in the light, lawful and bright, and he understood now only half the truth of the place. He had spent 30 years believing he practiced in a well-run corner of the Concord. He had a patient who had felt from a medbay bench that the corner was rotten to the coil. "Why tell me the scale of it?" he said. "You have just made the two of us more dangerous. And you have just told me the thing they will most want to make sure never leaves this station." "Because you asked how I could be so calm." Cole leaned back against the wall. "And the answer is I'm not planning to be on the transport, and I'm not planning to run, because you can't run from a species that owns the gates. I'm planning to make it so getting rid of me costs them more than keeping me does." He closed his eyes. "I just have to figure out how a rigger with a hole in his head does that before Amit sets the date." The date, when it came, was 6 days out, and it did not come from Amit. It came from the board. Cole felt it 3 nights later, lying in the dark, the way he felt everything now, a change in the shape of the traffic, the sanctioned rings lighting in a new pattern. The authority had thinned the schedule. Sanctioned transits through the cluster's live gates dropped off a cliff, freighters held at the outer marks, the braided throat of the frontier going quiet the way a road goes quiet when someone up ahead knows a thing the drivers don't. He lay still and read it. A relay only cleared its lanes for 2 reasons, a hazard and an audit. He found out which the next morning, when the whole station's routine bent around a single arriving ship. "Concord Inspectorate," Oral told him, low, changing the dressing with his back to the door. "A span audit packet. It arrives in 5 days. Amit has known for a month it came down the priority channel. That is why he cleared the lanes. He wants the cluster clean and quiet when the auditor's ship comes through the sanctioned ring." The doctor's fingers were careful and quick. "Corvin has not been audited in 9 years. 5 days. Cole was doing arithmetic behind his eyes. "And he wants me gone before it, so he ships me in 4. Or 3. 4, he'll want me long gone, but he'll want the timing to look like coincidence." Cole opened his eyes. "So here's the shape of it. Auditors come in 5 days, through the front door on the board, all lawful. And Amit's got a second network that door doesn't show, and he's got a rigger who can feel it, and he's got 4 days to make the rigger disappear in a way the auditors will never trace." He was quiet a moment. "I've been thinking about it wrong. I kept thinking about how not to be on the transport. That's the small problem. The big problem's the auditors. They're going to fly in through the front door, stamp the board, look at the 9 gates, find them lawful, and fly out again and never once feel the 10th. And Amit knows it. That's why he's not scared of them. He's scared of me." The doctor's hand stopped. "You are the only instrument in the cluster," he said slowly, "that can show an auditor the 10th gate." "Yeah," Cole sat up. "So I stop planning how to survive Amit, and I start planning how to still be here, and still be able to do this when those auditors come through the ring. Everything else is just the way there." It was the first time Oral had heard the boy sound less like prey and more like the thing the survey graders were too polite to call the humans to their faces. He found, to his surprise, that it did not frighten him. It steadied him. He had made the instrument. He discovered he wanted, very much, to see it used. "Then you will need me to keep you on the station for 4 days, he said, "against a provost of the enforcement caste, with a filing history he owns and a transfer order he has already cut." "No," Cole almost smiled. "I'll need you to do the one thing a doctor can do that a provost can't override without an auditor asking why." He looked at the doctor. "Say I'm too sick to move." Marshal Caste came to the med bay the following day to decide whether the human was too sick to move, and Cole gave the performance of his life by not performing at all. The marshal was VSK like the provost, but where Amit had gone soft and administrative in 200 years of running relays, Caste was enforcement kept sharp, a head shorter, a shade darker in the chitin, plated forelimbs scarred where the segments had been broken and regrown. He did not translate his first several clicks, and Oral did not offer to. He walked the small bay once, slow, taking its measure the way a predator takes a room, and then he stood over the human on the bench and regarded him with the flat, compound stare of his kind. "You feel gates," Caste said. The translator laid it down without inflection. "The doctor thinks I feel my own nerves," Cole said. "He's the doctor." I did not ask the doctor. The marshal lowered himself into the room's only chair, which creaked under the plated weight, and folded his forelimbs. "I asked you. You feel gates. Show me." Oral opened his mouth. Kesh's stare flicked to him once, and the doctor closed it again. Cole sat still. He understood the shape of the test perfectly, because he had spent 11 weeks failing versions of it against his own hope. If he performed, if he reached and grasped and announced, he could be led. A performer can be baited into a wrong answer, and a wrong answer would let the marshal write unreliable on the file and clear the transport. And if he refused, that was its own answer, and it was worse. So he did the only thing that was neither. He waited. "The doctor keeps the bay quiet," Cole said after a moment conversationally to the ceiling. "So I hear the station. There's a sanctioned freighter coming up on the 4th ring right now, heavy, or hauler by the feel, low and slow, still about 40 seconds out from threshold." He drank his cold tea. "You didn't tell me that. It's not on any screen in this room. Check it if you want." Kesh did not move for a moment. Then one forelimb rose and keyed a band at his wrist, and he read something off it, and the compound eyes came back to the human and stayed there. In the silence, out on the 4th ring 6 tiers up, a heavy ore hauler flowered out of a sanctioned threshold and settled onto its cradle, low and slow, 40 seconds after the human had called it. "That is the board," the marshal said. "You feel the board." "Sure." Cole set the cup down. "Now this one you won't find on the board." He tilted his head, that fractional listening angle, and Oral watched the marshal watch him do it, and watched something cold move behind the compound eyes. "There's a cold sill in the floor of Cradle 9. 6 tiers down, coreward end of the 3rd tier. It's not charging right now. It's just sitting there the way it sits there every day. It's been there the whole time your board's been calling that cradle dead." He looked at the marshal level. "You already knew that, though. You just wanted to see if I did." The chair creaked as Kesh came out of it. He crossed the small bay in 2 steps and stood over the human, and the plated forelimbs were very still, and for a moment Oral thought the enforcement caste was going to do the thing enforcement castes did when a problem could be solved with a limb. Cole did not lean back. He looked up at the marshal with the flat, unbothered calm of a man reading a gauge that had told him something he already knew, and he did not move at all. "You are going to be transferred," Kesh said, very quietly, the translator barely carrying it. "For your health." "I know," Cole said. "Doctor says I'm too sick to move for a few days, though. Bleaking spinal fluid from the graft. Real risk if you jostle me." He held the marshal's stare. "You could override a doctor's hold, but an auditor's coming in 5 days, and an overridden medical hold on a labor casualty is exactly the kind of paperwork an auditor pulls the thread on. Your call, Marshal. You're the one who has to explain it if it snarls." The bay was silent. Out on the tiers, the noon glare pressed white against the drum, and somewhere below, a cold splinter sat in the floor of a dead cradle, waiting. Kesh straightened. He looked at Cole for a long moment, and then at Oral, and the doctor understood that a decision had just been made, and that it was not the decision either of them had asked for. 4 days, the marshal said. "The doctor's hold stands until the auditors clear the ring, then it does not." He moved to the door and paused and did not turn around. "You are a clever animal," he said. "I have put down cleverer. Rest well, human." And he was gone. "He gave us 4 days, Oral said, when the bay had been quiet a while. "Why 4? He could have jostled you onto a transport tonight and let the graft do the killing." "He did not. Because he's smart and because Amit told him to keep it clean." Cole was up now, moving slow around the small bay, one hand trailing the wall, not for balance, the doctor realized, but the way a man runs his hand along a rail he's checking. 4 days puts me on the day before the auditors dock. The hold from you covers the delay. It all reads as a sick rigger who took a turn and got shipped for care. Nothing to pull a thread on. He stopped at the window. It's a good plan. I'd have made the same one. Then we have 4 days to make a better one. No, Cole turned. We have 4 days to make theirs cost too much. There's a difference. I can't out-authority the authority, Doc. I can't outgun them, I can't outrun them, I can't outvote them. The only thing I've got is the one thing they can't have, which is that I know where the 10th gate is and they can't afford for anyone else to. He came back and sat, testing the bench with his sense of it before he trusted it. So the whole game is this. When the auditors come through the front door, I need to hand them the 10th gate in a way they can't file away as a head injury. I need them to feel it, or the next best thing to feel it. Once they've got it, I stop being the dangerous thing. The gate does. And if Amit ships you the day before, as you say he will, then I need to still be here the day after. Cole rubbed the graft seal behind his ear, an absent gesture that had become a habit. That's the part I don't have yet. For 3 of the 4 days, they worked it like a rig problem, which was the only way Cole knew how to work anything. He lay in the bay and read the cluster, and Oral wrote nothing down and remembered everything. And between them they built a chart of a network that existed nowhere but in the boy's skull and the doctor's memory. The delivery door in Cradle 9, warming twice, 3 times a week, dark ships in and out. The deep cold sill past the second sanctioned ring, quiet, a reserve. And the far one, 4 hours, burn out along the Corward Lane, the big one, that Cole had only ever felt warm once a month. On the second day, the far sill began to warm, and it did not stop. That's early, Cole said. He was very still on the bench, the listening angle held long past comfort, sweat starting at his hairline from the effort of reaching that far. It shouldn't warm for another 2 weeks, and it's not the usual charge. The usual one's 1 ship in and out. This is, he stopped. His jaw worked. This is more. This is a lot of coils lighting slow, staggered, like something's gathering out there and holding. Gathering. Ships, cold, most of them just floating, waiting on the far side of a sill 4 hours out, and 1 warm coil holding the door at a low charge so they can come through fast when somebody says go. Cole opened his eyes, and for the first time in 4 days the flat comm had something under it. Doc, they're not just shipping me out, they're bringing something in. Through the network, time to the audit. The doctor felt the cold move down his plumage. What would they bring in during an audit? Something that makes an audit stop. Cole said it slowly, working it out as he said it, and Oral watched the shape of it arrive in the boy's face. Think about it from Amit's chair. Auditors come through the front door in 2 days. They stamp the 9 gates, find them lawful, and they leave, and everything's fine unless somebody hands them the 10th. I'm the only one who can, so he ships me. Fine. But he's a 200-year enforcement caste, and he doesn't leave a thing to one plan. What's the cleanest way to make sure an audit finds nothing? Make sure the auditors are too busy to look. He held the doctor's eyes. You stage a raid. You bring a reaver crew in through your own hidden door, right when the auditors are docked, and you let them tear up the relay, the med bay first, the records, the head-injured rigger who's making noise, and then your own guns drive them off. And the auditors don't file a report about lawful gates. They file a report about how the brave Span Authority fought off frontier raiders and lost some records in the fire. Everybody goes home. The 10th gate stays buried. And the only witness who could have felt it is a name on a casualty list from the raid. The bay was silent. Out past the drum, 4 hours along the Corward Lane, ships gathered cold in the dark behind a door that only the boy could feel. He is going to burn his own station, Oral said, to bury 1 gate. He's going to burn a med bay and a records vault and a rigger, Cole said. That's not the whole station to him, that's cost of doing business. He leaned back. And it's clean, that's what I keep landing on, it's so clean. Raiders hit a frontier relay, happens all the time. The board says the frontier's dangerous. Nobody ever feels the door they came through. Oral sat with it. He had come to the Concord's edge 30 years ago because the edge was quiet, because a careful physician could grow old there mending pilots and riggers and the occasional knife wound, far from the politics of the Corps. He understood now that the quiet had been a kind of blindness, the specific blindness of a man who has never had reason to feel the 10th gate. Then the auditors are not your salvation, he said. They are the trigger. The moment they dock, the raid comes. Yeah, Cole closed his eyes. Which means I've got 2 days to figure out how a rigger with a hole in his head turns a raid meant to bury him into the thing that digs the gate up instead. A long breath. No pressure. He found the first piece of it that night, from a human named Del. Del Aramco had been a dock foreman on Corvin for 19 years, long enough to go gray and stiff and permanently unimpressed, and he was the one who had carried Cole out of the Cradle 4 ring on the day the coupling had turned his skull to gravel. He came by the bay after his shift, the way he had come by twice a week since the accident, ostensibly to complain about the day, and actually to make sure the boy was still breathing. He brought a flask of something distilled from ration mash in 2 cups, and he poured for both of them, and he listened while Cole told him a version of the truth thin enough to be survivable and thick enough to be useful. So you feel the ghost sills, Del said when Cole had finished. He did not sound surprised. He sounded like a man being told a thing he had suspected for years. In 9, and out in the field. You knew about 9. I've hauled scrap in and out of 9 for 19 years, kid. I've felt the deck go wrong under my feet more than once and told myself it was the grav plating. Del drank. You don't work a relay this long without learning which questions get your transit pulled. I stopped asking the 9 questions about 12 years ago. He refilled his cup. What do you need? Cole told him. It was not much. He needed to know the docking assignments for the audit window, which cradle the inspectorate packet would be given, which tiers would be cleared, where the authority would want the auditors to stand. And he needed one thing that a rigger confined to a med bay could not get, and a dock foreman could. Access to the relay's open traffic channel, the all-ships band that every captain in the cluster monitored, the one channel the authority could not quietly mute without every ship in range noticing the silence. You want to talk to the whole cluster at once, Del said slowly. I want to be able to when it matters for about 30 seconds. Cole turned his cup on the bench. That's all. 30 seconds of open band at the right moment, and every captain in range hears a rigger call a gate before it opens. And then the gate opens. And then it's not my word anymore, it's theirs. They felt it. They were listening. Del was quiet a long time. He was 19 years gray and permanently unimpressed, and he had carried this boy out of a ring with his skull leaking, and he knew exactly what the authority did to dock foremen who cut open the traffic band without a stamp. He knew the cost of the thing the kid was asking for down to the specific gram of it. They'll pull my transit for good, he said. Maybe worse, Amit doesn't leave threads. Yeah, Cole did not soften it. He had learned on the Deathworld and off it that softening a cost was a way of lying about it. He doesn't. Del drank the last of his cup and stood, slow, stiff, 19 years old in the joints. My daughter came through Corvin last spring, he said, on a mail runner. Sat in a passenger ring for 6 hours on the 4th tier waiting on a transit stamp. He looked at the window, at the pale tiers, at the far dead cradle at the end of the row. If they'll burn a med bay to bury a gate kid, they'll route a mail runner through a raid and call it bad luck. I've been telling myself the 9 questions weren't my business for 12 years. He set the cup down. Turns out they were. I'll get you your 30 seconds. That was 3 days before the auditors, and it was the last easy piece. The next morning the authority moved Cole's transfer up a day. Marshal Caste brought the amended order himself at first shift, with 2 of his caste behind him in the bay door. He did not sit this time. The transfer is advanced, he said. You leave tomorrow. The doctor's hold is noted and overruled. A transport is assigned. Oral stepped between the marshal and the bench, which took more from the small physician than he let show. He is in active graft crisis. To move him now is to kill him. If you overrule a physician's hold on a patient in crisis, you do it in writing over your seal, and it becomes part of the record the inspectorate reviews. He kept his voice level, the clinician's voice, the one that had told bad news to 1,000 families without breaking. Their packet carries a medical officer. Standard for a span audit. If this patient dies in a transfer I formally opposed, that officer will ask why. I would rather not be the physician who cannot answer. It was the one lever Oral had, and it was a real one, and he watched the marshal weigh it. The VSK enforcement caste had run these relays for 200 years by being very good at knowing which cuts left marks. A dead labor casualty was nothing. A dead labor casualty over a physician's written objection, 2 days before an inspectorate medical officer walked the tiers, was a mark. "You are fond of this animal," Caste observed. "I am fond of my license." The marshal looked at him a long moment, then passed him at Cole, who sat on the bench and said nothing and watched the whole thing with the flat calm of a man reading a gauge. Caste made a decision. He did not overrule the hold. He did something colder. "Bay is quarantined," he said. "Graft crisis. No feeds, no visitors, no channels. A sick man needs quiet. My people will see he gets it." He gestured, and one of the caste behind him moved to the wall and killed the bay's panel with a single-plated stroke, and the pier feed and the traffic board and the soft glow of the station's data all went dark at once. "You will keep him alive until the auditor's medical officer can assess him. Then he transfers, or he does not, as the officer decides. Until then no one speaks to him but you." The compound eyes came back to Cole. "Enjoy the quiet, clever animal. It is the last favor this station will do you." They posted a guard at the door and cut the bay off from the station, and they left Cole Merrick blind. Except that they had cut the screens, and the screens had never been how he saw. "They think the board is my eyes," Cole said when the door had sealed. He had not moved. In the dark of the dead panel his face was calm. "They cut the board, watch." He tilted his head, the listening angle held it. "There's a male runner clearing the 6th ring right now, sanctioned. 3 passenger rings on the 2nd tier holding for a stamp, and the far sills finished gathering." He let the angle go. "It's warm and holding, full or near it. Whatever they're bringing through, it's ready to come the second somebody opens the door. They're just waiting on the auditors now." Oral stood in the dark bay with a guard at the door and no way to reach the traffic band and a transfer suspended on a lie about crisis, and he found that the boy's calm had stopped unnerving him and started to hold him up. "They have blinded us," he said, "and you can still see more than they can." "They can't cut the graft," Cole almost smiled. "That's the one thing on this station Amit can't switch off. He'd have to open my skull, and he can't do that with an auditor's medical officer 2 days out either." He leaned back. "He's boxed. He just doesn't know how boxed. He thinks he's holding a sick rigger in a dark room. He's holding the only working sensor in the cluster, and he cut its screens to make it feel helpless." The boy closed his eyes. "It doesn't feel helpless, Doc. It feels like being left alone with the answer." Dell came on the 2nd night, and he did not come to the door. He came the way a 19-year dock foreman knew how to come, through the service crawl behind the bay, the maintenance space no guard watched because no guard knew it fed the med bay's air handling. Cole felt him before he heard him, a warm mass moving slow through the dead metal, and told Oral where to put his ear to the wall. And when Dell's voice came through the handling grill, it was thin and low and out of breath. "They pulled my transit this morning," the foreman said. "Someone flagged me asking about the audit dock assignments. I'm grounded. Can't get to the traffic band anymore, kid. They'll have me off the station on the first hauler after the auditors clear." A rasp of breath. "I'm sorry. I couldn't get you your 30 seconds. Cole was quiet a moment. It was the first piece of the plan to come apart, and Oral watched him take the loss the way he took everything, without heat, turning it to see what was still usable. "Where'd they flag you?" Cole said. Traffic control, when I pulled the dock chart. So they know somebody wanted the audit dock assignments, but they don't know why and they think it's you. Cole opened his eyes in the dark. Del, the dock chart, before they pulled you, did you get it? A pause. Cradle assignments for the audit window. Yeah, I got it before they flagged me. The inspectorate packets assigned Cradle 6, 4th tier coreward end. A breath. 2 cradles down from 9. Cole went very still. Say that again. 6, they're docking the auditors at Cradle 6, 4th tier. Del's voice sharpened. Kid, that means something. It meant everything, and Aura watched it land in the boy's face. The moment a rig problem he had been forcing suddenly showed him the seam he had been missing. Cole sat forward, elbows on his knees, and when he spoke it was almost gentle, the voice of a man who has just felt the last shim slide home. They put the auditors 2 cradles from the ghost door, he said. Amit did that on purpose. He wants them close. He wants the raid to come up right under their window so the fight's in their faces and they can't do anything but watch the authorities' guns save them. He almost laughed, and there was no warmth in it, only the cold pleasure of a problem coming apart clean. He built me my 30 seconds, Doc. I don't need Del's band. I don't need to talk to the whole cluster. I just need the auditors to be looking at Cradle 9 at the exact second it opens, and Amit's parking them 140 meters from it and lighting it himself. You cannot reach them, Oral said. They dock in a sealed packet. You are quarantined behind a guard. No, but their medical officer walks the tiers. Cole turned toward the dark bay, toward the doctor. Standard for a span audit. You said it yourself. He assesses the sick rigor before they clear my transfer. That's not Amit's plan, that's law. That's the one part of this Amit couldn't cut, because cutting an inspectorate medical assessment is exactly the thread they'd pull. He was fully alive now, in the way that had nothing to do with heat. The marshal cut my screens and posted a guard and quarantined the bay, and in doing it, he built me a room that the one official on this station Amit can't touch has to walk into, alone with me, before I can be moved. The boy's mouth moved, not quite a smile. He didn't box me, Doc. He built me an appointment. Through the grill, Del let out a slow breath. You're going to tell an inspectorate medical officer to stand at your window and watch a dead cradle. I'm going to tell him exactly when to watch it and exactly what he'll see and exactly what it means. Cole leaned back. And then it opens on my word right under his nose with the whole raid pouring out of a gate the authorities board swears is dead. After that, it's not a head injury anymore. After that, it's the Concord's problem. He was quiet a moment. They'll get off the station. First hauler you can. You did your part, and there's nothing left for you here but a debt Amit's going to want to collect. Kid, go home, see your daughter. Cole put his hand flat on the wall, over the grill, over the warm mass of the old man on the other side. I've got it from here. Del Aramco was 19 years gray and permanently unimpressed, and he had carried this boy out of a ring with his skull leaking, and he pressed his own hand to the other side of the wall for a moment. And then he was gone back through the dead metal, and Cole never saw him again, and it was the cleanest thing anyone did for him on that station. The auditor's packet cleared the sanctioned ring at the 4th hour of the next day, and Cole felt it come through the front door like a bell. He was ready for it. He had spent the night reading the shape of what was coming until he knew it the way he knew the floor of the bay. The far sill 4 hours out, warm and holding, ships gathered cold behind it. The delivery door in Cradle 9, cold now but keyed, waiting for the hand that would warm it. The whole trap sitting loaded under the noon glare, needing only the auditors to arrive to spring it. He felt the packet's threshold flower open on the second ring, clean and sanctioned and announced, and he felt the ship slide through, bigger than a male runner, armored, an inspectorate hull with teeth folded flat but present, the one ship in the cluster that did not belong to the span authority. They're here, he said, second ring. They're being brought around to 6. He tracked it behind his eyes, the armored hull warping toward the fourth tier. Coming up the coreward face now, 2 cradles down from the door. A pause. Dock. When they dock, the clock starts. Amit's not going to wait long. He wants the raid to look like it caught the auditors mid-inspection. My guess is he lights 9 within the hour of them docking. Maybe sooner. Oral had not slept. He stood at the dead panel in the thin light that came through the small window and watched the boy read a battle that had not started yet off the inside of his own skull. And the medical officer comes to us before that, has to assess the sick rigor, clear or hold the transfer. That's the auditor's first order of business because it's the piece the authority flagged for them. Amit wants me cleared and gone before the raid. The auditor wants me assessed for the record. Cole opened his eyes. So the medical officer walks in here, alone or near it sometime in the next hour, into a quarantined bay with a guard at the door and a sick human on a bench. And I get one conversation. One. He looked at the doctor. I don't get to sound crazy. I get to sound like the calmest man he's ever met, handing him a fact he can check in 60 seconds. If I reach too hard, I'm a head injury. If I plead, I'm a head injury. I hand him the gate flat, like a rigger reading a gauge, and I let the gate do the rest. And if he does not believe you, then he walks out, and an hour later the raid comes up under his window exactly like I called it, and some of the people on this station die who didn't have to, and the auditor spends the rest of his life knowing a sick human told him and he wrote it off. Cole said it without weight, the way he said the costs of things. I'd rather he believed me before, not after, but it works either way. That's the thing about the gate, Doc. It doesn't care whether he believes me. It opens when it opens. All I'm doing is putting his eyes on the right cradle at the right second. After that, it's not my word against Amit's. It's the universe against Amit's. The guard at the door shifted. Boots in the corridor. A second set, lighter, unhurried. A gait none of them had heard before, measured, official, the walk of someone who had never once had to hurry on any station in his life. That's him, Cole said quietly. He straightened on the bench and rubbed the graft seal behind his ear once and let his hands go still and became, in the space of a breath, the calmest man in the cluster. Let him in, Doc. And then whatever I say, back me on the medicine and nothing else. I'll carry the rest. The bay door unsealed. The inspectorate physician was a grown, heavy, slow, a head and a half taller than Oral and twice as broad, his hide the dull gray-green of river stone, his four-fingered hands moving with the deliberate care of a creature built on a high-gravity world where nothing was ever done twice. He wore the plain gray sash of the Concord Inspectorate over a working coat, and he carried a diagnostic case, and he filled the small bay's doorway completely before he stepped through it. The guard made to follow him in. The groans stopped and turned and looked at the guard for a moment without a word, and the guard stayed in the corridor. I am Physician Inspector Dorinet, he said. His translated voice was low and unhurried, each syllable set down like a stone laid in a wall. I am assessing a patient flagged for transfer under an opposed medical hold. You are the treating physician. Oral selleth vestibular reconstruction. Oral inclined his head. The patient is Cole Merrick, human labor casualty, bilateral vestibular destruction, reconstructed with a proprioceptive graft. He is in the 11th week. Dorinet's slow eyes moved to Cole and stayed there a moment, taking the measure of him, the ordinary young human on the bench, the dirt still faint on his hands where 11 weeks of medbay washing had not quite reached, the graft seal behind his ear, the flat calm. The hold cites active graft crisis, the groan said. The transfer order cites a stable patient fit for coreward care. These cannot both be true. He set the diagnostic case on the tray with a care that made the small motion take a full second. I will determine which. Then I will clear or sustain the transfer and file it. That is the whole of my business here. He looked at Cole. Are you in pain, human? Some, Cole said. That's not why the doctor's holding me, though. The groan paused. It was not the answer a sick man gave. No. No. Cole met the slow eyes, level, calm. a rigger reading a gauge. The doctor's holding me because if you move me tomorrow, I'll be on a transport in the deep frontier when a gate opens beside it that isn't on any board, and a raider crew comes out of it, and the board says I was lost to bad luck on a dangerous lane. That's why he's holding me. The crisis is real enough to buy the days, but that's the reason. The bay was very quiet. Oral closed his eyes for a moment. There it was, the boy had spent the whole plan on being calm and flat, and now he had opened with the wildest thing a head injury could say. And Oral understood, a half-second late, that this was the plan, that Cole had judged this groan in 10 seconds and decided the man could not be led up to a lie gently, that he had to be handed the whole impossible thing flat and cold and checkable, or not at all. Dorinet did not react the way a smaller creature would have. He did not scoff or soften or reach for the word delusion. He was a high-gravity being. He did nothing quickly, including judge. He lowered himself onto the room's one chair, which took his weight without complaint because someone had built it for the VSK, and he folded his heavy hands, and he looked at the human for a long moment. "That is a specific delusion," he said without heat. "Go on." "It's not a delusion, and I'll prove it in about 40 minutes, but let me give you the checkable part first." Cole did not raise his voice. He never did. "You came in through the second sanctioned ring and they brought you around the coreward face to Cradle 6, 4th tier. You docked about 20 minutes ago. 2 cradles down the row from you there's a cradle the board calls decommissioned, Cradle 9, dead 6 years, coils pulled. There's a live gate in the floor of it. It's cold right now. Within the hour, someone with a span key is going to warm it, and a raider crew is going to come through it onto the 4th tier, right under your window, while your ship is docked and your auditors are inspecting. And the authorities' guns are going to drive them off and save you, and everyone's going to go home certain the frontier is dangerous." He let it sit a beat. "You can't feel that gate. Your instruments can't feel that gate. Nobody in the Concord can feel that gate except me, because a Selith surgeon grew me something that does by accident, and the authority found out I could feel it. And that's the whole reason there's a transfer order on a labor casualty 2 days after they learned an audit was coming." Dorinet was silent. His slow eyes went to Oral. "Is this the graft you built?" "Yes," Oral's voice was steady. "I built it to give him a fixed spatial reference. It is field-sensitive tissue. It responds to curvature." He chose the next words with care because they were the truest and most dangerous ones he would say. "I did not intend the effect he is describing. I have spent 11 weeks trying to disprove it, Inspector, and I have failed every time. He has called dark arrivals on that cradle before they landed to the second from this bench with the feed switched off. I have watched him do it. I am a careful physician, and I am telling you I cannot explain it as anything but what he says it is." The groan looked between them for a long moment. Then he did the thing that Oral would remember about him for the rest of his life, the thing that separated an inspectorate physician from a span provost. He did not decide. He tested. "You say within the hour," Dorinet said. "You say a bearing I can check. Then check it now, human. Tell me a thing that is true this minute out there that I can confirm from this room that is not on any board." He drew a slim reader from his sash and woke it. "I have the cluster's sanctioned traffic in front of me. Tell me a thing that is not on it." Cole tilted his head, the listening angle, and held it, and Oral watched the sweat start at his hairline from the reach. "Cradle 9's still cold," he said, "so I can't give you the raid yet, it hasn't started. But the far sill, the big one, is out along the coreward lane, about 4 hours burn off your board entirely. It's warm and it's holding, right at the edge full charge, and there are ships gathered cold behind it. A lot of them. That's your raider crew, waiting on the far side of a door 4 hours out for someone here to open the near door and give the go." He opened his eyes. "You can't see the far sill, but you've got an armored inspectorate hull with real sensors sitting on Cradle 6. Point them coreward down the lane, 4 hours out. You won't see a gate, but a cold fleet holding station in empty deep space off a shipping lane that you might catch if you look at exactly the piece of nothing I'm telling you to look at. Nobody points sensors at empty deep space off a lane. There's no reason to, unless somebody tells you the reason. Dorinet regarded him. Then slowly, he keyed the reader and murmured something into it in his own tongue, a request routed back to his own docked ship, to the armored hull's own sensors, aimed at a piece of empty nothing 4 hours down the coreward lane that no one had any reason to look at. The wait was the longest 4 minutes of Oral's life. The groan sat unmoving, heavy hands folded, the reader glowing in his palm. Cole sat and breathed and let the listening angle go, saving himself. Out past the drum, the noon glare pressed white against the tiers, and a cold splinter sat in the floor of a dead cradle, and 4 hours down the lane, in a piece of nothing, something waited. The reader chimed. Dorinet looked at it for a long time. "There is a cold mass," he said at last, "holding station in deep space off the coreward lane 4 hours out. No transponders, no drives lit. 9 hulls, perhaps 10, stationary in a place no ship has any reason to be." He raised his slow eyes to the human on the bench. "My sensor officer flagged it as a survey error. There is nothing there to hold station near. No gate, no mark, no reason." A pause the length of a stone being set. "You told me where to find a thing that has no reason to exist, and it exists." "Yeah," Cole said quietly. "That's the reserve. That's the door they'll open when the near one starts. Now do you want the near one, Inspector?" "Because I can feel a hand moving toward the 9 key right now, and once it warms, you've got about 90 seconds before the first hull comes up under your window." Dorinet stood. For a creature so large and so slow, he came off the chair very fast. He did not run for the door. A groan did not run. But he crossed to the small window in 3 long strides and put his slow eyes on the 4th tier, on the row of cradles baking under the white noon sun, on Cradle 6 where his own armored hull sat docked, and Cradle 9 too down the row where a dead ring sat over an amber decommissioned glyph. "Show me," he said. "Talk me onto it. I will watch the cradle. You tell me what I am watching." Cole came off the bench. He did it slow, the way the graft still made him, testing the floor with his sense of it, and he crossed to the window and stood beside the huge gray physician, a small dirt-flecked human at the shoulder of a creature twice his mass, and he put his own eyes, for whatever that was worth, on a cradle he had never needed to see to know. "It's cold still," he said. "Wait," the listening angle. "There, somebody just keyed it. It's warming, slow so the ring stays quiet. That's how they keep it off the board. They never bring it up fast enough to register. Watch the middle of the ring, Inspector. Not the lamps. The lamps are dead. The middle." His voice did not change at all. "About 70 seconds now. Whoever's driving is going to trim the burn cleaner than the last few. They've been sloppy, but they'll want it clean with you watching. First hull's a light attack ring, then bigger behind it. They'll fan out across the 4th tier and go for the soft targets first, and the med bay's a soft target and the records vault under it is the real one." He paused. "You should get your ship's officer on your reader, right now. Not to shoot, just to watch. You want the Inspectorate's own sensors recording this cradle at the second it opens. Because after it opens, the authority's going to say a lot of things about what happened here. And the only thing that beats a 200-year enforcement caste story is your own hull's recording of a raider fleet coming out of a gate their board says is dead." Dorinet had already keyed the reader. He was speaking into it in his low stone voice, and Oral caught enough of the translation to understand. The armored hull, 2 cradles down, was turning its folded teeth and its honest sensors toward Cradle 9, and it was recording. 40 seconds, Cole said. Down the corridor past the guard, the station's tone changed. Oral felt it before he understood it, a shift in the grav plating, a bleed of pressure, the specific hum a relay made when its own defense grid came live. The Span Authority was bringing up its guns, not against the gate, in front of it, getting into position to save the auditors from the raid the Authority itself was about to let in. "They're arming the grid," Oral said. "Yeah, right on time." Cole's eyes were on the middle of the dead ring. Amit's guns come up now, so they're hot when the reavers land, so he can drive them off in front of the auditors 30 seconds after they arrive. It's choreographed, Doc. He's not defending the station. He's staging a rescue. A breath. 20 seconds. Inspector, whatever comes out of that cradle, your job for the next minute is to do nothing but record it. Don't let your hull shoot. The second an inspectorate ship fires, this becomes a battle, and Amit gets to write it as a battle. Keep your guns cold and your sensors hot. Let the authorities' guns do the shooting. Let them save you. And record every second of it, because the recording is the only weapon in this room that Amit can't spin. He paused. 10. The three of them stood at the small window, the boy, the Seleth, the groan, and watched a dead cradle under the white noon sun, and waited for a gate that only one of them could feel to prove itself to the other two. 5, Cole said. 4, 3. The air in the middle of the dead ring folded. It came the way the first one had, weeks ago, a wrongness in the middle of the ring, the far gantries bending and doubling and gone. But this time it did not stop at 1. The smear tore wide, wider than any sanctioned threshold Oral had ever seen, and the first hull came through it fast and hard, a lean mat attack ring with its guns already tracking, and behind it a second, and a third, fanning across the fourth tier under the white noon sun exactly as the boy had said they would, running dark, unstamped, pouring out of a cradle the span authorities on board swore was dead. First one's clear, Cole said, flat, reading a gauge. 2 more out, fourth coming, they're going for the tier, the med bay, then the vault under it. Inspector, your hull's recording. It is recording. Doranet's low voice had not changed, but his slow eyes had gone very hard. 9 hulls from a decommissioned cradle, on the authorities' own tier. A pause. There is no version of this the span writes as lawful. There's the version where you're not here to record it. Cole's head tilted, held. 5th hull, 6th. Doc, they're heavier than Amit planned. Look at them fan. That's not a crew taking a paid dive and pulling out. That's a crew committing. Amit hired reavers to stage a raid, and the reavers looked at an undefended relay full of toll and decided to keep it. His jaw worked. The far sill just went hot. The reserve. He's not opening it. They are. The shear are bringing their hole reeving through both doors. Oral felt the cold go all the way down. They have turned on him. They were always going to. Cole did not move from the window. You can't hire a reaver crew to almost take a station and trust them to stop at almost. Amit's smart, but he's 200 years of running a relay where everyone obeys the board. He forgot that the people he was letting in the back door don't read the board. Out on the tier, the span authorities' defense grid opened up, hard white lances of fire from the drum's emplacements, catching the third reaver hull and gutting it, a staged rescue firing its first shot exactly on cue. And the reavers, who were supposed to take the hit and fall back, did not fall back. They spread and dug in, and began to kill the emplacements one by one. His guns aren't enough, Oral said. His guns were sized to lose on purpose and win at the end. They were never sized to fight a real reaving. Cole's voice stayed level, but the sweat was running now, and Oral saw the first thin thread of blood start from the boy's left nostril, the graft reaching further and holding longer than it had ever been asked to. Amit built a play where he controlled both sides. He's got one side now. The shear have the other, and the other one's bigger. Down the corridor, the guard at the door was gone. Oral heard the plated boots go, running, called away, or simply fled. And for the first time since the quarantine, the bay stood open to a station that had begun, in earnest, to die. Inspector. Cole turned from the window, and there was blood on his lip, and none of it reached his voice. Your hull has real guns, folded but real. In about 4 minutes, this stops being a fraud you're recording and starts being a reaving that takes this station and everyone docked at it, including your ship. When that happens, you're going to want to fight, and your gunners are going to look out at a tier full of hulls under a noon sun and a station grid firing wild, and they are not going to be able to tell a reaver from a lighter from a male runner in the smoke. He wiped the blood on the back of his hand, absently, the way he wiped grease. I can. Every hull out there sits in the field a specific way. The reavers came through a gate. They carry the threshold on them awake for a while after. The male runners and the passenger rings and the lighters didn't. I can feel which is which. I can tell your gunners where to put a shot and where not to, hull by hull, faster than your sensors can sort the smoke. He held the groan's slow eyes. You've got an honest gun and no eyes in that mess. I've got no gun and eyes on all of it. Put me on your gunnery channel and we break this. Leave me off it and your gunners fire blind into a crowded tier and kill the people we're trying to save. Dorinet looked at him for exactly 1 second, which for a groan was a headlong rush of a decision. You are a labor casualty with a head injury, he said, and you are asking to direct the guns of an inspectorate warship. Yeah, Cole did not blink. And in about 3 minutes you're going to wish you'd said yes 1 minute sooner. Your call, Inspector. You've already seen me be right twice about things that had no reason to be true. This is the third. The groan keyed his reader. He spoke into it, low and fast in his stone tongue, and Oral heard the shape of an order that a career inspectorate physician had no authority to give and gave anyway. And a moment later a channel opened in the bay, the armored hull's gunnery band, crackling, a hard-clipped voice on the other end asking who in the depths of space was being patched to fire control. Cole took the reader from the groan's huge hand. He held it the way he held everything, without ceremony, and he put his eyes back on the tier, and he began, in a flat rigger's voice with blood drying on his lip, to talk an inspectorate warship's guns onto a reaving nobody else could see clearly. It should not have worked. Oral would think that for a long time afterward, that by every law of how the Conquered was organized, a 19-year-old human maintenance rigger, blind in one sense and bleeding from a graft, should not have been able to do what he did in the next 11 minutes. But the boy did not think in the Conquered's categories. He thought in curvature. Hull bearing 2 forlow coming up the coreward face. That's a reaver, it's got the wake on it, take it, Cole said, flat. And the armored hull 2 cradles down put a lance through a matte ring that the smoke had hidden from its own sensors, and the ring came apart. The one behind it, closer in, 3-1, that's a lighter station crew, leave it, leave it. The 2 coming around the vault side, both reavers, both wake, they're going for the records, take the leading one. The second one'll break when the first goes. The hull fired, and the leading reaver died, and the second one broke exactly as he'd said. Passenger ring on the second tier, holding, no wake, that's civilians, that's people, put a shot anywhere near it and I walk off this channel. Dorinet stood at his shoulder and watched the tier and watched the reader that showed his hull's fire solutions, and Oral watched the groan's face, and what he saw there was a scientist's face, a being methodically confirming, shot by shot, that the impossible thing was real, and revising his entire understanding of the universe in real time without once letting it slow his hands. He is not guessing, Dorinet said low almost to himself. Every call, he is not guessing. No, Oral said. He never is. It took me 11 weeks to stop expecting him to. The reaving should have taken Corvin's sill. It had the numbers, and it had surprise, and it had the far sill open behind it feeding fresh hulls into the fight. But it did not have the one thing every attacker in the history of the deep frontier had relied on, the certainty that the defender could not see the gates. The shear had come through a door they believed was invisible, into a station they believed was blind, and they had run headlong into the single instrument in the Conquered that made a hidden gate no better than an announced one. Every micro-jump they used to flank, every short in-system hop to get behind the emplacements, Cole felt the threshold pucker before it opened and called the exit before the hull cleared it, and the honest inspectorate gun was already tracking the empty space where the reaver was about to be. 2 of them are going to hop the vault wall, Cole said. In about 6 seconds. They'll come out low on the far side thinking they're behind your line. They won't be. Track the vault's coreward corner and wait. 6 seconds later, 2 reaver hulls tore out of a micro-threshold exactly at the vault's coreward corner and flew directly into the armored hull's waiting fire. And Oral understood that he was watching a thing the deep frontier had never once seen, an ambush walking into its own reflection. But it cost. The blood was running steadily from the boy's nose now, and a fine tremor had started in the hand that held the reader, and his voice, though it never rose and never broke, had begun to come slower, each call dragged up from further down. He was holding the whole field at once: the station, the sun, the grav plating, 9 sanctioned rings, 3 ghost sills, a far reserve, and 40-some hulls scattered across a burning tier, each one a knot of curvature he had to feel and sort and name, and the graft had been grown to give a man a felt sense of down, not to map a war. Oral had built an instrument for standing up. The boy was using it to do something it had never been meant to survive. Cole, the doctor put a hand on his shoulder. The graft, you are past what it can take, your nose. I know, Cole did not look away from the tier. Reaver bearing 1-1 high, take it. I know, Doc, it's fine. Passenger rings clearing the second tier, good, let it go, don't track it. He wiped his lip on his wrist and left a smear. About 40 more seconds and the sheer figure out they can't flank a station that sees their jumps, and they run for the far door. When they run, I stop. Just let me get them to the door. You are bleeding into your own graft. Reaver low coreward, take it, a breath that shook. There'll be time to bleed after. Marshal Caste came to the med bay while the reeving broke, and he came to finish the one piece of Amit's plan that could still be salvaged. Oral heard the plated boots in the corridor and knew them, and turned, and put himself between the door and the boy without deciding to. A small gray physician squaring up against 200 years of enforcement caste. Caste came through the door with a sidearm in one plated forelimb and murder in the flat compound stare, and he took in the room in a single sweep. The human at the window with a reader in his hand and blood on his face, the groan beside him, the recording, the ruin of the plan, and he understood, the way a career enforcer understands, that the situation had gone entirely out of his caste's control. Off the channel, Caste said. The translator laid it down hard. Now, human, off the channel or I put you off it. Cole did not turn around. Reaver Tutulo, take it, he said into the reader, and the armored hull fired, and then he lowered the reader and turned, slow, blood on his lip, and looked at the marshal with the flat calm of a man reading a gauge that had just told him something he already knew. You can shoot me, Cole said. It won't get you anything. That's the part I need you to hear before you do it, Marshal, because you're not a stupid animal and I'd rather you spent your next 10 seconds thinking instead of pulling a trigger. He wiped his lip. The recording already exists. Your own tier, your own dead cradle, 40 hulls out of a gate your board calls decommissioned, on an inspectorate warship sensors, sent coreward the second it started. That's done. It happened. There is no version of the next 10 minutes where that recording stops existing. Killing me doesn't unmake it. Killing the doctor doesn't unmake it. Burning this bay doesn't unmake it. All any of that does is add 3 bodies to a recording the Concord's already going to hang your whole caste with. The marshal did not lower the sidearm, but he did not fire either. The compound eyes flicked to Dorinet, to the gray inspectorate sash, to the reader still glowing with the armored hull's fire control. Amit gave the order, Caste said. The translator made it flat, but there was something under it now, something an enforcement caste rarely lets show. The gate, the crew, the audit, it is his hand on all of it. My caste only. Followed the board. Cole said it without mercy and without heat. I know, that's what everybody on this station did, followed the board. The board said 9 was dead, so nobody warmed a coil that wasn't there. The board said the frontier was dangerous, so nobody asked why the male runners kept getting unlucky. Amit owned the board, so the board was the truth. He held the marshal's stare. You want to know the actual reason your caste is finished today, Marshal? It's not me. It's that Amit built a whole province of lies on the one assumption that nobody could ever feel the gates. And then a Selith surgeon fixed a rigger's ears wrong. That's it. That's the whole thing. 200 years and it comes apart because I fell off a coupling mount and got put back together sideways. He turned back to the window and raised the reader. Reaver, running for the far door, let it go, no, take it, it's the last committed one. Marshal, you've got about a minute to decide whether you're a VSK who followed a bad provost or a VSK who killed an inspectorate witness. One of those your caste survives. Point the sidearm somewhere useful or put it away. For a long moment the marshal did not move. Then Marshal Caste lowered the sidearm. He did not put it away. He turned it deliberately toward the corridor, toward the two of his own caste who had appeared in the doorway behind him. Amits, come to see the med bay burned as ordered, and he said something to them in the clicking undertongue the translator did not carry, and whatever it was, they did not come in. They looked at the marshal, and at the sidearm now aimed at them, and at the gray inspectorate physician in the room, and they withdrew. I am a VSK who followed a bad provost, Caste said. The translator laid it flat, but the boy had heard him and did not gloat, and that was its own kind of answer. The recording exists. You are correct. There is nothing to be gained by a third death that is not already lost by the first two hulls. He looked at Cole a moment longer. You could have let me pull the trigger. It would have made your case cleaner, a murdered witness. You chose to talk me out of it instead. I don't need it cleaner. Cole was already turning back to the window. I need it done. Dead witnesses take longer to explain than live ones. Reaver, far door, let it go, that's the last of the committed ones they're breaking. He wiped his lip. You want to be useful, Marshal, get on your caste's band and tell every emplacement on this drum to hold fire on anything without a wake and let the reavers run. The fight's over. They know it. The only people who die in the next 2 minutes are the ones your gunners shoot by accident in the smoke. The marshal looked at the human for a moment more. Then he keyed his own band and began, in the clicking undertongue, to give the order, hold fire. Let them run. And Oral understood that a thing had just happened on Corvin Sill that the deep frontier had never once seen. An enforcement caste taking targeting direction from a labor casualty, because the labor casualty could see, and the caste could not. Out on the tier the reaving broke. It broke the way a wave breaks, all at once, the committed hulls dying and the rest suddenly nothing, but a scatter of raiders realizing they had flown their hole reaving into a station that saw every jump they made. They ran for the far door, the ghost sill 4 hours out that had fed them, and Cole let them run, calling the honest gun off the fleeing hulls one by one, keeping it on the two that turned to fight and cold on the rest. They're going to open the far sill to pull out, Cole said. Big threshold, all of them at once, they'll want out fast. His voice was very slow now, the blood at his lip and a fresh thread from the other nostril and the tremor gone all the way up his arm. Doc, when they open it, I'm going to feel the whole thing light at once, near door and far door and every hull's jump and the reserve all together. That's more than I've held. I need to hold it about 10 seconds. Get the inspector's ship sensors on the far door bearing before it opens, because after this, I might not be able to give it to you again. Cole. 10 seconds. The boy did not look away from the window. I've held it this long, 10 more. Dorinet did not argue. He had spent 11 minutes revising his understanding of the universe, and he had arrived, like Oral 11 weeks before him, at belief. He keyed his reader and put his hull's honest sensors on the piece of empty, nothing 4 hours down the coreward lane, where a gate no instrument could feel was about to open, and he waited on the word of a bleeding human. There's one more thing, Cole said, and his voice had changed, not louder but with a weight in it, the weight of a man deciding to spend the last of something. Inspector, your open band, the all-ships channel, the one every captain in the cluster monitors, give it to me, 10 seconds of it. Dorinet paused. Every captain in range would hear you. That's the idea. Cole wiped his lip. There are mail runners and passenger rings holding on these tiers right now full of people who came through Corvin to go somewhere else and got caught in a raid that was staged to bury me. In about 8 seconds, a fleet of reavers is going to open a gate 4 hours down the corward lane and run for it. And some of those civilian captains, when the shooting stops, are going to want to run too down that same lane, away from the station, straight at a door full of fleeing reavers. I can tell them not to. I can tell them exactly where the door is and exactly when it's open and exactly which bearing to hold clear of, and every captain who hears it lives. He held the groan's eyes. And every captain who hears a human call a hidden gate to the second, and then hears it open right where he said, that captain goes home and tells the story. You can't bury a gate the whole cluster heard called before it opened. Inspector. Amit's recording problem was one ship. Give me the open band and it's 100. For 1 full second, a groan's headlong rush, Dorinet waited. Then he opened the all-ships band and put it in the human's bleeding hand. Cole lifted the reader. He did not clear his throat or steady his voice or announce himself. He spoke into the open band the way he spoke into everything, flat and low and certain, a rigger reading a gauge to 100 listening ships. All captains holding at Corvin, this is a warning one time. There is a gate opening 4 hours down the corward lane, bearing corward low off the shipping line in about 6 seconds. It is not on your board. It has never been on your board. A reaver fleet is about to run out through it, so hold clear of that bearing until they're gone. Do not fly the corward lane low. Repeat, there is a gate off your board corward low and it is opening now. A pause, the length of a breath. You're going to feel me be right in about 4 seconds. Remember that a human called it. Remember the board can be wrong. 4, 3, 2. 4 hours down the corward lane, in a piece of empty nothing that no ship had any reason to be near. The air folded, and a threshold tore wide, and the fleeing reavers ran out through a gate that 100 captains had just heard a human call to the second, and the inspectorate hull's sensors caught it, and 100 captains' boards caught the ships appearing at a bearing their own gods swore was empty, and on 100 bridges across the cluster. A fact that the Span Authority had spent 200 years and a great deal of money, and at least one staged raid to keep from ever being felt was, all at once, felt. Cole held it. He held the whole field at once, the near door still cooling, the far door blazing open, 40 hulls wakes and the reserve and the 9 sanctioned rings and the grav plating and the sun. For the 10 seconds it took the last reaver to clear the far threshold, and Oral watched the cost of it run down the boy's face in 2 red lines and gather at his jaw and drop. They're through, Cole said. His voice had almost nothing left in it. Far doors closing. It's closing. The listening angle wavered. It's closed. And the reader slid out of his hand and the boy went down and Oral caught him before the deck did. He did not lose consciousness so much as let go of it. The way a man sets down a load he has carried past the point of being able to feel his hands. Oral got him onto the bench, and the small gray physician's careful fingers were already at the graft seal, and what he found there frightened him more than the reeving had. The graft had been grown to give a man a felt sense of down. It was field-sensitive tissue, delicate, meant to whisper the pull of the local frame to a nervous system that had lost its own way of knowing it. Cole had made it hold a war. He had made it feel 40 hulls and 3 ghost sills and a reserve and 100 sanctioned thresholds all at once, past every margin Oral had built into it, and the tissue had done what living tissue does when it is asked to carry 10 times its load. It had burned. He is bleeding into the graft bed, Oral said, to Dorinet, to Kesh, to anyone. His hands were moving fast now, the calm clinician's voice gone thin. The tissue is scorched. I can save his life. I do not know yet what I can save of the sense. He looked up. Inspector, I need my bay's power. I need the feeds. I cannot work a graft crisis in the dark. Kesh crossed to the wall and struck the panel back to life with a single plated stroke, undoing the quarantine he had enforced 2 days before, and the bay's light and feeds and data came up all at once. On the pier feed, the 4th tier lay smoking under the white noon sun, 3 reaver hulls dead on the apron, and the span emplacements cooling, and the inspectorate hull sitting whole on cradle 6, its folded teeth never fired. its honest sensors having recorded every second. On the traffic board, 100 captains' transponders held station, clear of the coreward lane, exactly where a human had told them to hold. Cole's eyes were open, barely. He was watching the ceiling, and his voice when it came was a thread. Did they get clear, the civilians? They held the bearing, Dorinet said. He had come to stand over the bench, huge and gray and slow, looking down at the small human with an expression Oral could not read across the species line but felt in his own chest anyway. Every captain held the bearing. The reavers ran into empty deep space, and your inspectorate has the gate on record from 100 hulls. No civilian ship was lost. The groan paused. You warned 100 captains and directed a warship's guns and talked an enforcement marshal off a murder in 11 minutes while bleeding into your own skull. I have been an inspectorate physician for 60 years. I have not seen its equal. Wasn't 11 minutes of me, Cole said, thread-thin. His eyes found Oral. Was 11 weeks of him telling me it was a healing nerve. The corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile. Turned out to be the other thing. Do not talk, Oral said. His hands did not stop. You have spent enough today. Do not spend words too. But the boy was already gone under, into the deep place where the body goes to decide what it can keep, and the small gray physician bent over the ruin of the thing he had built, and worked to save what a war had scorched. They took the provost that same afternoon, and they took him in the daylight, which Oral thought later was the only fitting thing about it. Physician-Inspector Dorinet was not a magistrate, but an inspectorate audit packet carried its own authority when a relay's own defense grid had just fought a fleet that came out of a decommissioned cradle on the relay's own tier, on the packet's own sensors, in front of 100 witnessing captains. Dorinet did not need a magistrate. He needed only to walk up to the core ring, slow and gray and unhurried, with the recording in one hand and Marshal Caste at his shoulder, and inform Provost Vashkir Amit that the conquered inspectorate was assuming control of Corvinsil pending inquiry, and that the provost would remain aboard the packet as its guest until that inquiry was done. Amit did not resist. His caste did not resist. 200 years of running the relay had taught them that the board was the truth, and the board now said, in the inspectorate's clean glyphs, that the provost of Corvin was relieved. So they obeyed the board as they had always obeyed the board, and it was the board that finished Vashkir Amit in the end, which Oral found he could not entirely regret. They cracked open Cradle 9 the next day. It took a work crew 4 hours to cut through the decommissioning plate the authority had welded over the cradle floor 6 years before, and under it they found exactly what a bleeding rigger had said they would find. A live coil ring, whole, maintained, keyed to the authority's own system, a gate that the board had called dead for 6 years, and that had in that time passed a great many ships that no ledger in the Concord had ever counted. The far sill took longer. They sent the inspectorate hull 4 hours down the coreward lane to the piece of empty nothing, and there, anchored to nothing, hidden from every instrument in the Concord, they found the reserve threshold, a deep space gate with no mark and no reason, exactly where the human had said it would be. And it was the finding of that one, more than anything, that turned an audit of one relay into an inquiry that would eventually reach across the whole span. Because a gate in a welded cradle could be one corrupt provost's private door, a gate anchored to empty deep space, 4 hours down a shipping lane, maintained and keyed and reserved, was infrastructure. It was a thing that had taken years and money and a caste silence to build. It was not one man's crime. It was a system, and the system did not stop at Corving, and the Concord's inspectorate, reading the recording and the cracked cradle and the deep space door, understood all at once that if there was a hidden lane through this cluster, there was very likely a hidden lane through every cluster the span authority ran, and that in 200 years no one had ever found one, because no one had ever been able to feel a gate that did not want to be felt. Until a Seleth surgeon fixed a rigger's ears wrong. Del Aramco came back on the 6th day, transit restored, cleared by an inspectorate that had reviewed exactly why a dock foreman had been grounded for pulling a docking chart and had drawn the obvious conclusion. He came straight to the med bay, stiff and gray and permanently unimpressed, and he stood over the bench where the boy lay pale and bandaged and looked at him for a while without saying anything. "You're alive," Dell said finally. "So they tell me." Cole's voice had come back, most of it. He was sitting up, which had taken Oral 3 days to allow, and there was a fresh dressing behind his ear and a tremor in his left hand that had not been there before and did not entirely go away. "You got off the station." "Got as far as the outer mark before the inspectorate turned my hauler around and brought me back to testify." Dell pulled the room's one chair around and sat, slow. "They've got the whole thing now, kid. The cradle, the far door, Amit, the crew he hired. Caste's caste is talking. Turns out an enforcement caste that followed a bad provost is very interested in explaining that it only followed the board." He shook his head. "There's inspectorate packets peeling off towards 6 other clusters. They think the whole span's rotten with these doors. 200 years. He looked at the boy. "You did that, from a bench, with a hole in your head." "Oral did it." Cole rubbed the graft seal, the absent gesture, and winced now where he had not winced before. "I just felt the thing he built." "How much of it's left?" Dell asked. "The feeling." Cole was quiet a moment. Oral, at the tray, went still, because it was the question he had not yet been able to answer for the boy and had been dreading being asked. "Some," Cole said. "Not what it was." He looked at the window at the tier where the reaver hulls had been cleared and the emplacements cooled and the white sun pressed flat and bright across the drum. "I can still feel a gate. 9 when they warm it for the inquiry. The sanctioned rings. The big obvious ones. But the fine part, the part where I could sort 40 hulls in the smoke and tell a reaver's wake from a lighter, that's gone. Burned it out holding the war." He flexed the trembling hand and watched it not quite obey. "I can feel that there's a gate. I can't always feel exactly where anymore or exactly when. It's like," he searched for it. "It's like I used to read the page and now I read the headline. The headline's still true, it's just not the whole page." "Can he recover it?" Dell asked Oral. "I do not know." Oral set down the instrument he had been pretending to clean. "The graft is living tissue. Living tissue heals. But it was grown to give a man a sense of down, and it was never grown to survive what he did to it, and I cannot promise him the fine sense comes back, because no physician in the Concord has ever grown this thing before, or burned it, or watched it heal. He is the first." He looked at the boy. "He will always feel a gate. Whether he ever again feels one the way he did that day, I cannot tell him. I am sorry. I would rather lie to you, and I have decided not to." Cole took it the way he took everything, without heat, turning it to see what was still usable. "Headlines enough," he said. "Headlines more than anybody else in the Concord can feel." He almost smiled. "I fell off a coupling mount and got put back together as the one thing in known space that can find a door somebody's trying to hide. Even the burned-down version of that is worth more than a rigger's wage." He looked at his hand, the tremor. "Costs, though. Everything costs. This one just costs slow." The inspectorate came for him on the 8th day, and it came in the person of Doronet, because the groan had asked to be the one, and no one had told a physician-inspector of 60 years standing no. He filled the doorway the way he had the first time, slow and gray and deliberate, and he lowered himself into the chair that had held a marshal and a dock foreman, and he folded his heavy hands, and he looked at the human on the bench for a while before he spoke. "You understand what you are now," Doronet said. It was not quite a question. "To the Concord. I understand what a hidden gate is worth to a species that spent 200 years not being able to find one." Cole met the slow eyes. "I understand there are inspectorate packets going to 6 clusters that would all like to have a human on board who can feel the 10th door. I understand I stopped being a labor casualty on a transfer order the second your hull sensors caught a reaver fleet coming out of a dead cradle." He was calm about it, the flat calm that had unnerved a provost and steadied a doctor. "I'm not stupid, Inspector. I know I just became useful to the whole Concord, and useful is a kind of dangerous. Amit wanted me gone because I could feel his gates. The inspectorate's going to want to keep me because I can feel everyone's. Different reason. Same fact. I'm the instrument now, and instruments get owned. Dorinet was silent for a moment. Then he did a thing Oral had not expected. He inclined his heavy head, a slow, deliberate motion, the closest a groan came to respect. Yes, he said. That is exactly correct, and most of your species would not have said it so plainly, and none of the Span Authority ever did. He unfolded his hands. So I will be plain in return. The inspectorate does not own instruments. It employs witnesses. There is a difference, and I will hold the difference myself, because I was in this room when you talked my hull's guns onto a reeving you could not have seen and warned 100 captains off a door that was killing them, and a being who does that is not a thing to be owned. He is a person to be paid and protected and asked. He drew a slim document plate from his sash and set it on the tray, slow, deliberate. The Concord Inspectorate is offering you a commission, not a conscription. You may refuse it and go home to whatever human world you came from with your name cleared and your wage tripled for what you did here, and no one will trouble you, and I will personally see to it that no one does. Or you may take it and travel the span with an inspectorate packet and feel the doors that other provosts spent 200 years hiding, and end them one cluster at a time. He paused. I will not pretend the second path is safe. There are a great many provosts in the span with a great deal to hide, and you have just shown all of them what a human with a scorched graft can do to a hidden lane. If you take the commission, you will spend the rest of your life being the most dangerous passenger on every ship you board. The slow eyes did not waver. I am obligated to tell you that. I am also obligated to tell you that I hope you take it, because I have spent 60 years auditing relays I could not truly see, and for 11 minutes in this bay I saw one clearly for the first time, and it was because of you. Cole looked at the document plate for a long moment. Then he looked at Oral, at the small gray physician who had grown him a sense of down and given him, by accident, a sense of everything, and who was standing very still at the tray pretending not to have a stake in the answer. You'd have to come, Cole said to him. The commission. Whoever grew this thing has to be the one who keeps it running, and you're the only one who's ever grown it. Oral's careful hands were not quite steady. I am a frontier physician, he said. I came to the edge because it was quiet. It's not quiet anymore, Doc, Cole almost smiled. You made sure of that. You fixed my ears wrong, and now there's inspectorate packets going to 6 clusters. He held out the trembling hand, palm up, the graph-scarred instrument of a boy who had felt a war. Come keep the thing you built running. I can't do it without the man who made it, and I don't want to try. Oral looked at the offered hand, the tremor in it, the graph-scarred fact of a boy who should have been shipped out as a total loss, and had instead unspooled 200 years of a caste's hidden lanes from a med bay bench, and he found that the decision he had been dreading was not a decision at all. He had made a thing. A physician who makes a thing does not get to pretend he did not. I fixed your ears wrong, he said. I will not fix them wrong alone. He put his careful hand over the boy's trembling one briefly. The closest a Selith came to a clasp. I will come. Someone has to keep telling you it is only a healing nerve so that you keep proving me wrong. Dorinet rose from the chair, slow and gray and satisfied. Then it is done, he said. The packet holds at Corvin 4 more days for the inquiry. You will heal and you will decide the details, and when we leave, you leave with us. He moved to the door and paused and looked back at the human on the bench. There is one more thing, and it is not inspectorate business, so I leave it to you. The provost has asked to see you, Amit. He is aboard the packet held for the core courts, and he has asked once to speak with the human before he goes. The slow eyes were unreadable. You owe him nothing, less than nothing. I will refuse it in your name, and he will never ask again. Say the word. Cole was quiet a moment. No, he said. I'll see him. He looked at Oral. I want to know what a man says after he burns his own station and it doesn't work. That's worth 4 days of healing to hear. They took Cole up to the core ring on the 3rd day. In a med chair he pretended he did not need and oral insisted upon, and they brought him into a bare holding room aboard the inspectorate packet, where Provost Vashkir Amit sat behind a field barrier with 200 years of running relays folded very still around him. The VSK did not rise. He could not. The barrier held him to the seat. But he turned his plated head, and the compound eyes took in the human, the med chair, the bandage, the tremor, the ordinary young face that had ended him. And for a long moment the provost of Corvin simply looked at the thing that had walked out of a med bay and taken his province apart. "You are smaller than I expected," Amit said at last. The translator laid it flat. "I read your file a dozen times in 11 days, a labor casualty, a vestibular reconstruction. I built a very careful plan around a small broken animal, and the small broken animal is smaller still in person, and it has finished me." He tilted his head. "I find I want to understand how, not the gate. I understand the gate. I want to understand you. Indulge a dead man." "You're not dead," Cole said. "You're arrested. There's a difference, and it's the same difference you spent 200 years teaching everybody not to see." He was calm, the flat calm, no heat in it at all. "You want to understand how a small broken animal finished you. It's easy. You built your whole province on one assumption, Provost, that nobody can feel a gate that doesn't want to be felt. 200 years, every hidden door, every skimmed toll, every ship that vanished on a dangerous lane, all of it rested on that one assumption. And it was a good assumption. It was true for 200 years. He shrugged one shoulder, the rigger's economical shrug that cost him a wince now. It just stopped being true. And you'd built so high on top of it that when it stopped being true, the whole thing came down at once. That's not me finishing you. That's you finishing you, the day you decided a thing that couldn't happen never would." Amit was silent for a moment. "You could not have known the crew would turn." "I knew you can't hire a reaving to almost take a station and trust it to stop at almost. You knew it too. You just needed it to be true, so you decided it was." Cole watched him. "That's the same mistake, Provost. It's the only mistake you ever made, over and over, bigger each time. You decided the thing you needed to be true was true. Nine's dead because you need it dead. The crew stops because you need it to stop. The human's harmless because you need him harmless." He paused. "I'm a rigger. Riggers don't get to decide what's true. You put your hand inside a charging ring on the assumption it won't light, and it lights anyway, and it turns your skull to gravel, and the field doesn't care what you needed. I learned that at 19 with my head in a coupling. You never learned it at all. That's the whole difference between us. That's how the small broken animal finished you." The provost regarded him for a long moment through the barrier, and then he did a thing Oral had not expected. He laughed, a dry clicking sound the translator did not try to carry, the laugh of a being who has spent 200 years certain of a thing and has just been shown, plainly, the exact shape of the certainty that killed him. "Do you know what you have done?" Amit said when the clicking stopped. "Not to me, to your species, to the conquered." He leaned forward against the barrier. "For 200 years the galaxy has looked at your Deathworld and its labor pool and its Havlin ratings and decided you were useful muscle, strong, disposable, a clerical curiosity from a world too violent to visit. That is what you were 3 weeks ago, a curiosity." The compound eyes glittered. "And now there are inspectorate packets going to 6 clusters. And every one of them wants a human aboard, because it turns out the disposable muscle from the violent world can feel the one thing the whole civilized galaxy spent 200 years learning to hide. Do you understand what happens now? Every provost in the span with a hidden door, and there are many human, I was not the first and I was not the worst. Every one of them just learned that the cheap human labor they have been working to death in their coil rings can feel their secrets from a medbay bench. They will not sleep well. None of them, ever again." He sat back. "You did not just take Corvin. You made your entire species the thing the galaxy cannot hide from. They will fear you now, not for your strength, for your senses. And a galaxy that fears you is a very dangerous place to be small and broken and useful in." Cole took it the way he took everything, without heat, turning it to see what was still usable. "Yeah," he said. "I know. You know. I've known since the auditors docked." Cole met the provost's stare, level calm. "You think you're telling me something. You're telling me the thing I decided to do it anyway despite." He leaned his head back against the med chair. "You spent 200 years hiding doors, Provost. I spent 11 weeks feeling ships die in gates nobody would admit were there, and male runners going unlucky on lanes that weren't unlucky, and people getting counted as bad luck because you needed them uncounted. So when the auditors docked and I understood exactly what feeling the gates was going to cost me and my whole species, that we'd be feared, that we'd be hunted, that being useful just turned into being dangerous, I did it anyway. Because the other choice was to lie in a bay and feel the doors and say nothing, the way this whole cluster said nothing, the way you needed everybody to say nothing." His voice did not rise. It never did. "You're not warning me. You're just describing the price, and I already paid it. Look at my hand." He held up the trembling hand, the graph-scarred fact of it, and the provost of Corvin looked at it and had nothing to say. "Everything costs," Cole said, and lowered the hand. "This one costs slow, and it costs my whole species, and I paid it with my eyes open. That's the last difference between us, Provost. You spent 200 years pretending things were free. I've known the price of everything since I was 19 with my head in a ring." He nodded to the guard at the door. "We're done. Enjoy the core courts. I hear they can't be fooled by the board." They took him back down to the bay, and he did not speak on the way, and Oral did not make him. The inquiry ran for 11 days at Corvin, and then it stopped being about Corvin. The inspectorate cracked the far sill and mapped its bearings, and the bearings led to 2 more deep space doors the human had not been close enough to feel, and those led further. Kest's caste offered the difference between followers and architects, chose followers with great enthusiasm and a great deal of documentation, and the documentation named relays. Not one relay, a dozen. A pattern of decommissioned cradles and reserve thresholds and unlucky lanes running the length of the span, 200 years deep. A shadow map laid under the lawful one, and no one in the whole civilized galaxy had ever been able to feel a single door of it, because feeling a hidden door had been, until 11 weeks ago, a thing no one in the conquered could do. Oral watched the packets peel off toward the other clusters and understood that he had, with a graft groan to help a man stand, quietly ended an age. The age in which a gate could be hidden. It had lasted as long as the span itself. It had ended on a med bay bench because a rigger fell off a coupling mount, and a physician put him back together sideways. And the physician found he could not decide whether that made him a fool or the most consequential surgeon in the history of his careful, unremarkable people. "Both," Cole told him when he said as much. The boy was up and walking the bay by then, slow, one hand trailing the wall the way he checked a rail, the tremor still in the other. "You're both. That's usually how it goes. The big things get done by people who were mostly just trying to fix a smaller thing." He stopped at the window at the tier where the reaver hulls had been hauled away and the emplacement sat cold and the white sun pressed bright across the drum. "You were trying to help a rigger stand up. Turned out to be the door thing. It's fine, Doc. The door thing needed doing. Somebody's male runner is going to make it home now that wouldn't have." Dell came to see him off on the day the packet left. The old foreman found them at the packet's boarding ramp on Cradle 6, where the inspectorate hull sat whole in the noon light with its folded teeth and its honest sensors, the same hull that had recorded a reeving out of a dead cradle and never fired a shot it did not need. Dell was still gray and still stiff and still permanently unimpressed, and he stood at the foot of the ramp and looked at the boy for a while before he spoke. "So you're the inspectorate's problem now," he said. "So they tell me." Cole was standing on his own, slow, one hand on the ramp rail. The tremor was still there, it would always be there, you staying on. "Somebody's got to run the docks while they rip the walls out looking for doors." Dell shrugged. "New provost coming down from the Corps, Inspectorate pick, They say she's honest. I'll believe it when my transit stamps come through without a skim on them." He looked up at the packet at the gray hull. "You know what's funny, kid? 19 years I hauled scrap in and out of 9 and felt the deck go wrong and told myself it was the plating. 19 years I asked no questions." "You were here 11 weeks and you couldn't stop asking them." He shook his head. "I used to think that was because you were young. I don't think that anymore. I think it's because you couldn't help feeling the answers, and once you can feel them, you can't do what I did. You can't tell yourself it's the plating." "No," Cole agreed. "You can't." He looked at the old man. "You got me my 30 seconds, Del, different way than we planned. But you got them. Every captain who held that bearing, that's yours as much as mine. You want to carry something out of this, carry that." Del Aramco was 19 years gray and permanently unimpressed, and he had carried this boy out of a ring with his skull leaking, and he put out his hand, and the boy took it with the one that didn't shake, and neither of them said anything else because there was nothing else that needed saying. Then Del went back to his docks, and Cole went up the ramp, and the packet sealed behind him. The inspectorate hull cleared Corvin through the second sanctioned ring, lawful and stamped and announced, and Cole felt the threshold flower open around the ship and close behind it, clean and warm and fading. And for the first time in 11 weeks, he passed through a gate instead of feeling one open across a station. It was different from the inside. He sat in the observation blister with Oral beside him and the white sun of the cluster falling away behind, and he felt the sanctioned ring do its work, the smooth iris of curvature. The ship poured through a door that announced itself honestly, and past it, down the lane ahead, he felt the shape of what was coming the way he had learned to feel everything. "There's doors ahead," he said, quiet, reading a gauge. "Down the lane, sanctioned ones, most of them, but there's a cold one about 6 hours out off the line hidden. Feels like the far sill did, anchored to nothing." He was silent a moment. "There's going to be a lot of them, Doc. Now that I know what to feel for, I feel them everywhere. The whole span's full of doors somebody welded shut on paper and left running underneath." Oral watched the boy's face, the tremor, the scar behind his ear, the flat calm that had ended a provost. "Does it frighten you," he asked, "that there are so many?" "No," Cole leaned his head back. "It's just the job now. Amit was right about one thing, I'm the instrument. There's 100 hidden doors in the span and one thing in the Concord that can feel them, and it's got a scorched graft and a shaking hand, and it's going to spend the rest of its life going relay to relay feeling the doors and ending them one at a time." He closed his eyes. "There's worse ways to spend a life than making sure the mail runners get home. I was a rigger. Riggers fix things. This is just a bigger thing to fix." The hull ran down the lane toward the next cluster, and the doors gathered ahead in the dark, and the boy felt them come, one by one, and did not flinch from a single one. The first relay they reached was called Thesson Reach, and it had a provost named Alan Vore, who was very certain that his cluster was clean. He was cephalopod descended, mottled and gray, and he received the inspectorate packet in a bright glass-domed office with daylight pouring in from the planet below. And he was courteous and unhurried and entirely certain, because Thesson Reach had passed every audit for 40 years, and its 9 sanctioned gates were lawful, and its board was clean, and there was nothing on it anywhere that a physician inspector and his strange human passenger could possibly find. "You are welcome to inspect the gates," Provost Vore said, spreading 3 tentacled limbs in a gesture of open hospitality. "All 9. The board is current. We run an honest relay at Thesson, Inspector. I am not certain what you expect to find that 40 years of audits did not." "Nothing on the board," Dornet agreed, slow and gray. "We are not here for the board." He turned his heavy head. "Cole." Cole was standing at the window, at the glass dome, at the bright cluster turning in the planet light. He had been standing there since they came in, quiet, one hand on the rail, his head tilted at the fractional listening angle that Oral now knew meant he was reading a thing behind his own eyes. He did not turn around. "There's a cold sill in your 4th tier," Cole said. Under a cradle your board calls a fuel store. It's not a fuel store. There's a live coil ring in the floor of it. It's cold right now. He tilted his head. And there's a reserve out past your third sanctioned gate, deep, anchored to nothing, quiet. Been quiet a while. You haven't warmed it since the audit packet's transponder pinged the cluster 4 days ago. Smart. You went dark the second you knew we were coming. He turned, finally, and looked at the very certain provost with the flat calm of a man reading a gauge. You run an honest relay at Thesson, provost. 2 doors worth of honest, same as the last one. Provost Alenvor had gone very still, the specific stillness of a cephalopod whose color has begun, against its will, to shift. That is not possible, he said. There is no. Nobody can feel a hidden gate, Cole finished for him. Yeah, I know, that was true for 200 years. He looked at the cradle bearing behind his own eyes and then at the provost, and there was no heat in him at all. It stopped being true about 3 weeks ago. Word's going to reach you slow out here on the reach. Let me save you the wait. He nodded at the 4th tier at the cradle the board called a fuel store. Crack it open, Inspector. You'll find a coil ring. And then you'll find the next one. And the one after that, all the way down the span. Because Amit wasn't the first and he wasn't the worst. And every honest relay in the Concord has got exactly as many hidden doors as it thinks nobody can feel. Dorinet was already keying his reader, already routing his honest sensors at a piece of the 4th tier that no audit in 40 years had ever had a reason to examine. And the very certain provost of Thesson Reach watched a small dirt-flecked human turn from a window and take his certainty apart in the bright planet light, and understood, 40 years too late, that the age in which a door could be hidden had ended, and that it had ended in the shape of a boy with a shaking hand, who could feel every secret the galaxy had ever welded shut. They cracked the cradle open the next day. There was a coil ring in the floor of it, whole and maintained and keyed, exactly where the human had said. There was always a coil ring. That was the thing Oral came to understand in the months that followed as the packet ran relay to relay down the length of the span, and the boy stood at each bright window and felt the doors the board swore were dead. There was always a ring. The galaxy had spent 200 years certain that its secrets were safe because no one could feel them, and it had built its secrets everywhere on that certainty. And now the certainty was gone, and the secrets were all still exactly where the certainty had let them be built. Word ran ahead of them down the span, the way Cole had said it would, and it changed the shape of what they walked into. At the first relays, the provosts were merely certain, and their certainty broke in the planet light and they were arrested in the daytime and taken to the core courts. But certainty travels slow and fear travels fast, and somewhere in the 3rd month the packet began to arrive at relays where the provost already knew what a human passenger meant, and the reception changed. The doors went cold before they arrived, provosts scrubbing their networks the moment the packet's transponder crossed the cluster edge. And it did not matter, because a cold door was still a door, and the boy felt the ring in the floor whether it had been warmed in the last hour or not. But cold reception was not the only thing that changed. Amit had told him plainly, through a field barrier, what he had made himself, the most dangerous passenger on every ship he boarded, in a galaxy full of provosts with a great deal to hide. And a provost with a great deal to hide, who cannot scrub his doors fast enough, does not always choose the core courts. Some of them chose to make the human unlucky. It happened at a relay called Sunder Vault, a mining transfer station over a scorched daylight world, 4 months into the campaign. The provost there was a 4-armed scholar of the old academic caste, and he was courteous and unhurried and entirely certain. And Cole felt the ring in his 4th tier the way he felt them all now, flat, from a bright window, and named it. And then, that night, while the packet held at the vault waiting for the inquiry to open, Cole sat up in his berth in the dark and said, to no one, "There's a door being warmed that shouldn't be." Oral woke to the boy already dressing, slow, the tremor in his hand making the seals difficult. "What is it?" "Small sill, close. Somebody's warming a micro-threshold about 40 meters off the packet's hull coreward side right against the docking collar. Cole's voice was flat, reading a gauge. It's not on the board, it's the scholars. He's opening a little door right next to the ship. He got the last seal closed. Wake the inspector. Somebody's about to come through a gate onto this hull to make me unlucky, and I'd rather not be in my berth when they do. They came through the micro-threshold 4 minutes later, 2 of the scholars caste, in vacuum plate, cutting through the docking collar into the packet's aft passage, come to find a human in his berth and make his death look like the frontier being dangerous. They found the berth empty. They found, instead, a grown physician inspector and a marshal of the VSK enforcement caste, had been seconded to the packet's protection detail. His testimony having bought him that much of a future, waiting in the aft passage with the lights up and their weapons drawn, because a bleeding rigger had felt a door open against the hull and named it before the first plate was cut. It ended without a shot. The scholars caste, finding an ambush waiting for their ambush, did the arithmetic the shear had done at Corvin and surrendered, and the provost of Sunder Vault went to the core courts with an additional charge, and Cole slept the rest of the night in a different berth and did not mention it again. He tried to kill you, Oral said the next morning, unable to let it lie as easily as the boy did. In your sleep, through a door against the hull. Yeah, Cole was drinking something hot, the cup in his good hand. Emmett told me they would. It's not a surprise, Doc, it's just the job. There's 100 provosts down the span who'd rather I was unlucky than caught, and every one of them has doors, and doors are the one thing I can feel coming. He set the cup down. That's the part they can't get around. To kill me quiet, they need a hidden door, and a hidden door is exactly the thing I feel best. They can't come at me the one way that would work without using the one tool I'm built to catch. He almost smiled. It's a bad spot to be a provost in. They made me by hiding doors, and now they can't even kill me without opening one. Oral looked at the boy, the tremor, the scar, the flat calm that 4 months of being hunted had not touched, and he asked the question he had been carrying since Corvin. Does it ever stop being the job? Does any of it ever reach you? Cole was quiet a moment. It reaches me, he said. I feel every door that gets warmed to kill me the same as I feel the ones I'm hunting. I don't get to not feel them. That's the graft. I lie in the berth and I feel the whole relay around me, and somewhere in it there's usually a small cold door somebody's thinking about warming, and I feel it thinking about it. He turned the cup on the table. You asked at Corvin if the number of doors frightened me. I said no. That was true then, it's less true now. He looked at the doctor level. It's a lot of doors, Doc, and every one of them has somebody on the other side who'd rather I couldn't feel it. I'm not frightened of the doors. I'm tired of being the only one who feels them. That's a different thing, and it costs slower, and I don't have a name for what it costs yet. Oral had no answer for that and did not insult the boy by inventing one. But he did the one thing a physician who had made a thing could do. He began, that month, in the quiet hours between relays, to study the graft he had built, its structure, its scorched and healing tissue, the exact accident of field-sensitive celleth stock in a human skull, with a new and specific question in mind. Not how to remove it, how to grow another. He did not tell the boy at first, because he did not want to promise a thing he could not deliver, and because the science of it frightened even him. A human nervous system that would accept the graft. A field-sensitive stock keyed to curvature. An accident that had happened once, by a hair, in a rigger too injured to have any other option. To do it again, on purpose, safely, in a volunteer, was a thing no physician in the Concord had ever attempted, because no physician in the Concord had known, until 11 weeks on a frontier relay, that it could be done at all. But Oral had watched a boy grow tired of being the only one who felt the doors, and he was a physician who had made a thing, and a physician who has made a thing does not get to pretend he did not. You're building another one, Cole said, 6 months into the campaign, at a relay whose name Oral would forget and whose hidden door he would not. It was not a question. The boy had felt it somehow, not a gate, but the shape of the doctor's attention, the hours in the med bay, the new and specific care. Another sensor, another me. I am studying whether it is possible. Oral did not look up from the tray. It may not be. It nearly killed you the first time, and that was an accident I have spent 6 months trying to understand well enough to repeat on purpose. I will not put this into a volunteer until I am certain I can do it without burning them the way you burned. It may be years. It may be never. He set down the instrument. But you are tired of being the only one who feels the doors, and I am the only one who can make another who feels them, so I am trying. He looked at the boy. Not to replace you, to stop you being alone in it. Cole was quiet a long moment. The tremor moved in his hand, the slow cost of the thing he was, and he looked at it, and then at the small gray physician who had fixed his ears wrong and turned him into the thing the galaxy could not hide from, and who was now, patiently, in the quiet hours, trying to make sure he did not have to carry it by himself. Yeah, Cole said, do that. He was quiet a moment more. Do that, Doc. Not every door had carried cargo. They learned that at a relay called Marne Crossing in the 7th month, over a gray daylight world the mining castes had scraped down to bedrock. The provost there had already fled Corward when the packet arrived, tipped by the fear that ran ahead of them now, and it fell to Cole to walk the tiers with the inspectorate crew, and name the doors an absent man had left behind. There was the usual one, a coil ring welded into a false fuel store. There was a reserve deep off the 3rd gate. And there was a 3rd door that Cole stopped in front of and did not name for a long moment, standing very still at a bright window with his head tilted at the listening angle. And when Oral came to his shoulder, the boy's face had gone flatter than the doctor had ever seen it. That one's different, Cole said. It's small, passenger class. It only ever opened one direction out. Nothing ever came back through it. He was quiet. You don't build a one-way door for cargo, Doc. Cargo you sell. You bring the payment back. A door that only goes out and never comes back isn't for cargo. He looked at the empty cradle, at the welded plate, at the thing an absent provost had left running under his lawful board. It's for making things not be here anymore. They cracked it open, and they found the manifests the provost had been too rushed to burn, and the manifests were not of cargo. They were of names. Labor casualties, mostly. Riggers and coil hands and dock crew, many of them human, a few of them the fragile species who broke on a Havlan world, the ones who got hurt, or asked the wrong questions, or were simply owed wages the relay would rather not pay. A one-way door and a deep space threshold, and a list of people the board had quietly recategorized as transferred Corward for care. Oral read the list, and understood that he had heard those exact words before, in a bright core ring office from a provost named Amit, about a boy named Cole. This is what I was, Cole said. He did not raise his voice. He never did. Line item on a transfer list. Amit was going to make me a name on a manifest like this one. He set the list down, careful, the way you set down something that had been a person. 11 weeks earlier and no Seleth reading my file, and I'm on this list instead of standing here reading it. He looked at the doctor. That's the part I keep landing on. It's not that I'm special, Doc. It's that everybody on this list could feel exactly what I could feel about how their story was going to end. They just couldn't feel the door. So nobody believed them, and they went out through it one direction, and the board called it care. His jaw shifted. I can feel the door. That's the only difference between me and this list. One accident. One surgeon who read the wrong file. Oral had no answer. There was none to have. But he watched the boy fold the manifest closed and hand it to the inspectorate clerk, with instructions that every name on it be traced, and every family found, and told the truth, because the one thing worse than a person going out through a one-way door was a family spending the rest of their lives told it was care. It took the clerk a moment to understand that a labor casualty was giving an order to the conquered inspectorate, and it took Dorinet a single slow nod to make the order stand. They will not all be findable, the groan said quietly. Some of these are years gone. Find the ones who are, Cole said. Tell the families the truth about the rest. That's the job, too. He looked out the bright window at the scraped gray world. I can't bring anybody back through a one-way door. Nobody can, but I can make sure the next provost down the span knows that the door doesn't hide anything anymore, and I can make sure these families stop waiting for a transport that was never coming. He was quiet a moment. It's not enough. It's what there is. The span authority did not survive the inquiry. It took the courts a year and a half to work through what the packets brought back: the cracked cradles, the deep space reserves, the 200 years of unlucky lanes and uncounted ships. And when they were done, the authority that had run the Concord's gates was broken into pieces and remade under inspectorate oversight. Its boards audited by beings who now knew, as a plain fact of the universe, that a board could lie because a gate could be hidden. The frontier did not become safe. It became, for the first time in 200 years, honest about being dangerous, which the boy said was the most anyone could ask of a frontier. Dr. Oral grew his second graft in the second year, in a human volunteer, a former coil ring rigger from a Haviland 16 world who had lost her hearing and her balance to a sync error, the way Cole had lost his, and who understood exactly what she was being offered and chose it with her eyes open. It nearly failed. It did not fail. And on the day the woman first tilted her head at a bright window and named a door the board swore was dead, Oral wept, in the careful contained way of his careful contained people, because he had proven that the accident was not an accident anymore. It was a medicine. It could be made again. The boy would not be the only one for much longer. There were 4 of them by the 3rd year. There were a dozen by the 5th. They rode the inspectorate packets down the length of the span and stood at bright windows and felt the doors the galaxy had spent 2 centuries certain no one could feel, and the provosts with things to hide learned to sleep badly, and the mail runners came home, and slowly, relay by relay, the age of the hidden gate did not so much end as become the age in which hidden gates were found. The Concord recalibrated the way the Concord always had, which was slowly and against its will. For 200 years the great species had filed humanity under useful, a labor pool from a Haviland 17 world too violent to visit, strong and cheap and disposable, a clerical curiosity to be worked in the coil rings and counted out on transfer manifests. Oral watched that filing come apart across the whole span in the years after Corving, and it did not come apart into gratitude. It came apart into fear. The councils that had ignored the Deathworld now studied it. The castes that had welded doors shut on paper now understood that the cheapest hand on their relay might be the one thing in the Concord that could feel their secrets from a birth in the dark, and they did not thank the humans for it, and they did not sleep. The word that had meant disposable muscle began, in the deep frontier and then further in, to mean something colder, a species you could not lie to, could not hide from, could not make quietly vanish through a one-way door, because somewhere on the ship there might be a small tired person with a shaking hand who would feel the door open and name it flat before the first plate was cut. Amit had told the boy, through a field barrier, exactly what he had made his species. It took the rest of the galaxy years to feel it, but it felt it. Cole never fully got the fine sense back. He read the headline, not the page, for the rest of his life, and his left hand shook, and there were nights the whole weight of a relay's worth of doors pressed on him and would not let him sleep. He did not complain about it. He had known the price at 19, with his head in a coupling ring, and he had paid it at 19 weeks, on a med bay bench with his eyes open, and a man who has paid a price with his eyes open does not spend the rest of his life pretending it was free. Oral found him, on the last night before they reached the deepest relay of that year's run, in the observation blister, alone, watching the lane ahead fall past in the dark. "You should sleep," the doctor said. "There is a door tomorrow, there is always a door tomorrow." "I know." Cole did not turn. His good hand rested on the rail, the other lay still in his lap, the tremor patient in it. "That's why I'm up. I can feel it from here." Cold one, deep in the 4th relay's underside, been there 30 years by the feel of it. Somebody welded it shut on paper a long time ago, and it's been running underneath ever since. He tilted his head, the fractional listening angle held it a moment, let it go. There's a lot of them ahead, Doc. There's always a lot of them ahead. I used to think we'd get to the bottom of it, find the last door. I don't think that anymore. No, Oral agreed, and came to stand beside him at the rail, small and gray. I do not think there is a last door. I think there is only the next one. Yeah, Cole was quiet a moment. That used to bother me. It doesn't now. He looked out at the lane, at the dark ahead full of doors only he and a dozen others in all the galaxy could feel. You know what I figured out? It was never about getting to the bottom of it. A rigger doesn't fix the last coupling. There isn't a last coupling. You just fix the one in front of you and then the next one, and somewhere down the line there's a ship that flies because you did, and you never meet it, and that's the whole job. The corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile. I fell off a mount and got put back together as the thing that feels the doors. I didn't ask for it, and it costs me slow, and I'd do it again. Because there's a door in the 4th relay tomorrow that somebody welded shut 30 years ago, and there's people going through that relay who don't know it's there, and I do. He flexed the trembling hand and watched it not quite obey and let it rest. Somebody's got to feel it. Turns out it's me. Oral stood beside him in the quiet, the physician who had made the thing, and the thing he had made, watching the lane run down toward a relay full of doors welded shut on paper and running underneath. He did not tell the boy to sleep again. He had learned over the years that there were nights the weight of the doors would not let him, and that the boy did not want to be told to set it down, because setting it down was not a thing that could be done. So they stood at the rail together, and the hull ran on down the lane, and somewhere ahead in the dark, a cold gate sat in the underside of a relay, 30 years hidden, waiting to be felt. In the morning, at a bright window over a daylight world, a small man with a shaking hand would tilt his head and name it, flat and certain, a rigger reading a gauge, and a very certain provost would learn that the age of the welded door was over. And somewhere down the lane, past a gate no board had ever shown, a mail runner full of people he would never meet would make it home, and never know why, and that was the whole of it, and it was enough. He tilted his head toward the dark, and began to read the door that was coming.